But the 80% of people out there that fuck this up all the time in bear markets, because they're really only good at levered long. Their shorts aren't, they don't really trust their process because they don't have a good one. Like, in bear markets, Paul Tudor Jones, again, let's give him some credit. He'd say the hardest part of the move to get right is what? The last part of the move, right? To the downside. So again, what happens in the last, I think he calls it the last third of the move or whatever, the last part of the move, is that hedge funds start to cover too early because they're worried about the space ripper rally that you had in more bullish trends. Don't forget that tech was a bullish trend then. Go back and look at our signal in July. You know, when you go to bearish trend and you're in a crashing global equity market, crashing global currency market, crashing bond market, all three of those things, I think Paul Tudor Jones probably did live through that one because we had a bond market crash when I wasn't in the game. It's not something that a lot of people have done, never mind done so successfully. Okay? So that's why I'm getting those questions. And you tell me, I mean, the market's been down for 9 of the last 11 days, and each up day is down less than the prior. And what you have to be willing to go buy is the shit that you know that you shouldn't have owned. Profitless tech, piece of shit short companies that are going to go to zero, you know, like these things. This is what's going on.
That kind of goes to my next question. Kind of trading these two different types of things. Essentially, ticker that crash a lot, and barely go up, versus you're doing hasn't really crashed a lot, like as much.
Yeah.
Like some stuff is down, that versus something down low.
Right.
But it's at the top of the range. So I don't know, maybe giving you some tickers to help. What's your view on this? But like,
Do you have to?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
XBI, okay. So biotech versus like GXG.
I'm sure. And you see, for all you hedge fund guys out there that are smarter than me and have no problem telling your friends that when I'm not around, they call me names. I'm okay with it. Some of you like. Who's really asking the question now? That's a well-trained hedge eye Jedi, isn't it? Can you tell me the difference between biotech and Columbia? Not the coffee. Like, the country ETF.
XBI and GXB, right? Okay, let's take a look at these rules.
Or fractal patterns, which is going to be the way that we look at it. Let's take a look again. Yep.
GXG, not as much. Right.
You like to do that. Well, you know what happens in these, okay, very good. So let's just say that the duration is one thing, right? And then there's, so you got, you know, the duration and you get the, actually that's how you think of it, right? You think about the frequency and the severity, right? I know that that's it. Let's say that this thing has been going, I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's say that this thing's been going down for 106 days in the last 60 days, sideways. So again, this thing's just like straight down, and this thing's like kind of down, like that, over the same time period. They've both been great shorts, you know, but this one gets the severity check. You know, it's going down violently. So you could say that was about utilities, consumer staples, REITs. Then, oh, look, Mike Santoli told us the bond yields are down today. Let's go buy that. No, stop, okay? What actually happens here, in the way that a bear market ends, is what we call factor exposure convergence. Okay? We call, as in, I made that up, I think. Because I played it with two hedge funds that are world-class hedge funds that have massive risk management systems, factor exposures, etc. And when I was walking both of them through this, they're like, "Can you go through that again?" Okay, let's do that. You just keep going. And I didn't know you were going to. Yeah. Okay. Good. So, if you can, Ethan, if you can find it, I think it's slide 8, 9, or 10 in the macro book, slide deck, factor exposure table, the mainline factor exposure table. It's a green table that's got durations, factor risks on it. Find that. Good. No, go to the next one. Next slide. Next one. One more. There. Can I draw on that? Yeah. So this so the left side there, those are factor exposures. Okay. Now those factor exposures, this is pretty. I mean, these are good examples of things that I just consider a given. So again, we're in phase 2 of EdGuy Risk Management. I'm going to take my time to make sure you get this stuff so that next time you see it as I see it, which is I just see it as a given, right? That's it. That's actually the gap between some of them. Is that I see it, in my mind what I see is not what you're looking at, okay? And I want you to get, the closer we get to that, the more you're going to understand the process, the less you're going to freak out. Actually, look at the anxiety meter today. It's about as good as it gets, which is maybe telling you something about how well we've done as of late. But here you go. So if you look at something like, well, let's talk about what everybody's talking about, bond. If this year to date, which is not how we do it, you're long low yield and you're short high yield, you're plus 10 versus minus 16. So that's been, or if you look at something like quality, high short interest versus low short interest. If you're long the good companies that not everyone's short, you're beating the ones versus the bad companies. Okay? So that's basically what everybody crowded into. Low beta, low short interest, low yield, so that's where the crowd is. When you get back, now let's look at the other side, right? These things are now converging, so the shit that's gone straight down, like XBI, is now converging with Meta, Magnificent Seven, Google. See this? On the 1 week, it's just all down, but down 2-3%. There's not like these things aren't up. Then you look at the 1 month on high yield versus look at this. Oh, on a 1 month and on a 3 month basis, they've converged. They're both down the same. That is what defines a market crash. What defines inexperienced portfolio managers in a market crash is that they live in fear that those factors that went down the most are now going to lead a rally or lead it. This is how they ask the question. What makes sense, right? All you need is a day to show that on the screen, and like yesterday, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, this is the beginning of something. No, it's actually the beginning of something for sure. It's the beginning of me reloading on those shorts, which is important. So look at this. I mean, this one still probably has the most room to go. The quality versus the shit, right? So I expect that if we remain right that this is phase 3 of the bear market, the recession starts here in the 4th quarter, I think you're going to see a convergence where it all goes down together.
All right, thank you so much for that. We're gonna have to wrap it up there. We did go a little bit over time, but we'll be back, guys, Monday. Any questions? Put them in the comment section below. We'll look at that key. Turn it over to you.
I appreciate it. AI isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I'm not talking about the AI that you run for us every day. AI has failed, the team just told me, to create, it cannot create a rooster dirty dog. Like, I mean, it's not that competent.
I have a lot of opinions on this one, Keith, and I would say there is a lot of places it's going to fail that people think it's going to work. Well, really, anything's subjective. Like anything where human are
Yes.
subjective nature.
shirt, it's almost gonna be impossible to replicate that.
I mean, I like our seat at the table then, because we have the machines and we have our minds. It's gonna be big. By the way, today on the call, you heard Ami on the update on semiconductors. Oh my God, it was so bare, and everything's on it. Everything's on the app.
Yep.
We'll get into that. We'll get
We'll
into
get
that.
into it.
Let's have an interactive one today. Top three things
All right.
this morning in the notebook. Number one is going to be our long position. There's always a bull market somewhere in oil. Obviously, we're going to do that. Interest rates and the Qs or Nasdaq. First on oil, going into this weekend, and we hosted General McCausland, who's our military expert, geopolitical risk expert in Washington. We do have a Washington office that I never go to because I don't like Washington. But I love JT Taylor, great guy on the call this morning. He even said, like some of your clients, Keith, some of our clients, because I've been telling JT, I said, look, I've been on client calls all week and everyone's talking about how oil should go down because Israel hasn't rolled through yet or the U.S. hasn't engaged fully. And our team is like, are you kidding me? That's what Wall Street thinks? And I'm like, yeah. The shit that Wall Street believes is always bullish, don't forget. But again, our in-house view would be that instead of 6 days, this is going to be 6 fronts of war, okay? So we're long oil, we're long inflation, we're long geopolitical risk, and the PCE number, by the way, this morning, for everyone who's kind of hoping for a lower than expected PCE inflation number, we're dead wrong, okay? So PCE accelerated, not fake news, to 2.4%. So stay long of inflation. A big higher low yesterday in the risk range held beautifully. It was a textbook bounce for WTI right off the low end of the risk range. Some people are asking about energy earnings. I don't care. I just care what the signals do. Again, if something breaks, I'll sell it, and I'm going to sell it just like I'm going to sell all of my Japan today. Point number 2. Yeah, go check that. By the way, Japan runs out of quad, running quad 4 starting with January. Has anybody who's been looking at that quad map on slide 29, you can be on the switch. Let's see. He's no rookie anymore on slide 29. Is that 29? 27. There you go. You can see that. Oh. All the quads for all the countries, obviously. Point number 2, interest rates. Now, one of the biggest reasons why Japan signal sell was that you enjoined the equity with the interest rate signal. So again, you have a new, pretty close to a new cycle high in Japan on the 10-year yield at 0.87%. It's got a medium-term upside to 91 basis points. The risk range is widening on the 10-year yield in Japan, whereas in the U.S., it's narrowing. But it's narrowing in a very bad way. Very, very bad. Bad, bad, bad. Okay, so again, 4.70 is now the floor. So when you get people that are begging yesterday for quad 4 to happen faster, that's essentially what happened with the quad 4 day. Dollar up, rates down, energy down, oil down, utilities, you can see the bongo board, all the sectors that we were shorting were up. At least XLREO is shorting that, and certainly shorting more XLU, and you got the XLP, which is the other rate sensitive short in the real-time alert itself. So you know that was pretty close to the top end of the range, and so is utility. So there it is. Okay, so again, 4.70 is now the floor. So when you get people that are begging yesterday for quad 4 to happen faster, that's essentially what happened with the quad 4 day. Dollar up, rates down, energy down, oil down, utilities, you can see the bongo board, all the sectors that we were shorting were up. At least XLREO is shorting that, and certainly shorting more XLU, and you got the XLP, which is the other rate sensitive short in the real-time alert itself. So you know that was pretty close to the top end of the range, and so is utility. So there it is. No matter where you go, utilities is of course published daily. If you're hoping and praying, that's not a risk management process. This is what Wall Street's been doing the whole time. For a 44% decline in the TLT since the beginning of 2022, all they've wanted is scalping. But where are you still on my decision? You can barely hear it. It's like broken. Put that away. Let's just put that narrative away and watch the 10-year go back to a new cycle. Okay? You can do that? That's how we're set up. You can set up that way. Did you buy small TFIX on red yesterday? That's how you do it. Point number 3, how about those Qs? Oh. Now, one thing for the NASDAQ to go down 3 to 5%, which sounds like a correction. That's typically what if you look at my history of running my own money at least, or even when I ran money where my numbers were published all over the place, because I was at a hedge fund, we had LPs. 3 to 5%, I rarely would be down 5%. I actually got fired when I was down 3.4% at Carlisle. But I mean, being down 3 to 5%, that's what, how about down 6? 10? How about 12? Okay? Now, many of you would fire me if I'm down 3 to 5%. I like that. I like that kind of expectation. I want to work. I want to win. And if I'm not winning, maybe some of you cancel, but then you come back to me, and thank you for those of you that did this morning. I appreciate it. Because what's happened since July, when some people fired us because they're doing, I'm missing it. I go to the golf course and my buddy is long. Oh, shit, I just got rooster wet. That's how you lose your money. That's how you lose your golf membership, okay? You go from down 12.2% is the NASDAQ now, with the generals having been shot. So again, whether we like the stock fundamentally or not, I mean, Amazon's going to be very interesting today because the trend on that is not, again, in play yet. 132 is trend for Amazon, by the way. So pay attention to that. But we have Qs again and again and again. This is where the most pain is because this is what everyone owns. Of course, people that don't know what the hell they're doing and have that as their only asset allocation are going to have to deal with that. But again, we're looking at it for what it is, which is, of course, signaling phase 3 of the bear market. So again, that's what that is. S&P 500 actually is down a full 10% now from where we slapped that on an ETF Pro as well. And goes very top. Look at Ethan just slapping those things up. I have never hit the death that low.
It was a good death. Very sturdy. No problems with it.
I wonder if I did some training, if Bruce Lee could cut this. Next time you have a July lower high like that, it might take like 10 years. I'm going to pound that table hard. really, really hard. All right, let's just get into it. We'll,
What?
were you guys talking?
You were talking about pain trade. I was more thinking about it. I did some back of the hours that work on like a 1% UP in retirement. Significant. Like a 1% drawdown in retirement. You're
long geopolitical risk, and eight, it's going to be.
Yep.
We'll get into that. We'll get
We'll
into
get
that.
into that.
Let's have an interactive one today. Top three things this morning in the notebook. Number one is going to be our long position. There's always a bull market somewhere in oil. Obviously, we're going to do that. Interest rates and the Qs or NASDAQ. First on oil, going into this weekend, and we hosted General Coslin, who's our military expert, geopolitical risk expert in Washington. We do have a Washington office that I never go to because I don't like Washington. But I love JT Taylor, great guy on the call this morning. He even said, like some of your clients, Keith, some of our clients, because I've been telling JT, I said, look, I've been on client calls all week and everyone's talking about how oil should go down because Israel hasn't rolled through yet or the U.S. hasn't engaged fully. And our team was like, are you kidding me? That's what Wall Street thinks? And I'm like, yeah. The shit that Wall Street believes is always bullish, don't forget. But again, our in-house view would be that instead of 6 days, this is going to be 6 fronts of war, okay? So we're long oil, we're long inflation, we're long geopolitical risk, and the PCE number, by the way, this morning, for everyone who's kind of hoping for a lower than expected PCE inflation number, we're dead wrong, okay? So PCE accelerated, not fake news, to 2.4%. So stay long of inflation. A big higher low yesterday in the risk range held beautifully. It was a textbook bounce for WTI right off the low end of the risk range. Some people are asking about energy earnings. I don't care. I just care what the signals do. Again, if something breaks, I'll sell it, and I'm going to sell it just like I'm going to sell all of my Japan today. Point number 2. You wrote that down? Okay, we'll see it. By the way, signals stay in the risk range held beautifully. It was a textbook bounce for WTI right off the low end of the risk range. Some people are asking about energy earnings. I don't care. I just care what the signals do. Again, if something breaks, I'll sell it, and I'm going to sell it just like I'm going to sell all of my Japan today. Point number 2. You wrote that down? Okay, we'll see it. By the way, Japan runs out of quad. They run into quad 4 starting in January. As anybody who's been looking at that quad map on slide 29, Ethan, who's on the switch, let's see. He's no rookie anymore. Slide 29, is that 29? 27? Yeah, there you go. You can see that. All the quads for all the countries, obviously. Point number 2, interest rates. Now, one of the biggest reasons why Japan signaled sell was that you enjoined the equity with the interest rate signal. So again, you have a new, pretty close to a new cycle high in Japan on the 10-year yield at 0.87%. It's got a medium-term upside to 91 basis points. The risk range is widening on the 10-year yield in Japan, whereas in the U.S., it's narrowing. But it's narrowing in a very bad way. Very, very bad. Bad, bad, bad. Okay, so again, 4.70 is now the floor. So when you get people that are begging yesterday for quad 4 to happen faster, that's essentially what happened with the quad 4 day. Dollar up, rates down, energy down, oil down, utilities, you can see the bongo board, all the sectors that we were shorting were up. At least XLREO is shorting that and certainly shorting more XLU, and you got the XLP, which is the other rate sensitive short in the real-time alert itself. So you know that one's pretty close to the top end of the range, and so is utility. So there it is, no matter where you go, utilities is of course published daily. Again, if you're hoping and praying, that's not a risk management process. This is what Wall Street's been doing the whole time. For a 44% decline in the TLT since the beginning of 2022, all they've wanted is cow down. Just cow down. By the way, where? I do still have my decision. You can barely hear it. It's like broken.
Like a-
Put that away. Let's just put that narrative away and watch the 10-year go back to a new cycle. Okay? You can do that? That's how we're set up. We can set up that way. Did you buy some more PFIX on red yesterday? That's how you do it. Point number 3, how about those Qs? Oh. Now, one thing for the NASDAQ to go down 3 to 5%, which is called like a correction. That's typically what if you look at my history of running my own money at least, or even when I ran money where my numbers were published all over the place, because I was at a hedge fund, we had LPs, right? 3 to 5%, I rarely would be down 5%. I actually got fired when I was down 3.4% at Carlisle. But I mean, being down 3 to 5%, that's one thing. How about down 6? 10? How about 12? Okay? Now, many of you would fire me if I'm down 3 to 5%. I like that. I like that kind of expectation. I want to work. I want to win. And if I am not winning, maybe some of you cancel, but then you come back to me, and thank you for those of you that did this morning. I appreciate it. Because what's happened since July, when some people fired us because they're doing, I'm missing it. I go to the golf course and my buddy is long. Holy shit, I just got rooster wet. That's how you lose your money. I don't care. I just care what the signals do. Again, if something breaks, I'll sell it, and you know I'm going to sell it just like I'm going to sell all of my Japan today. Point number 2. Yeah, wrote that down? Okay, we'll see it. By the way, Japan runs out of quad. They run into quad 4 starting in January. As anybody who's been looking at that quad map on slide 29, Ethan, who's on the switch, let's see. He's no rookie anymore. Slide 29, is that 29? 27? There you go. You can see that. All the quads for all the countries, obviously. Point number 2, interest rates. Now, one of the biggest reasons why Japan signaled sell was that you enjoined the equity with the interest rate signal. So again, you have a new, pretty close to a new cycle high in Japan on the 10-year yield at 0.87%. It's got a medium-term upside to 91 basis points. The risk range is widening on the 10-year yield in Japan, whereas in the U.S., it's narrowing. But it's narrowing in a very bad way. Got a medium-term upside to 91 basis points. The risk range is widening on the 10-year yield in Japan, whereas in the U.S., it's narrowing. But it's narrowing in a very bad way. Very, very bad. Bad. Okay, so again, 4.70 is now the floor. So when you get people that are begging yesterday for quad 4 to happen faster, that's essentially what happened with the quad 4 day. Dollar up, rates down, energy down, oil down, utilities, you can see the bongo board, all the sectors that we were shorting were up. At least XLREO is shorting that, and certainly shorting more XLU, and you got the XLP, which is the other rate sensitive short in the real-time alert itself. So you know that one's pretty close to the top end of the range, and so is utility. So there it is. No matter where you go, utilities is of course published daily. Again, if you're hoping and praying, that's not a risk management process. This is what Wall Street's been doing the whole time. For a 44% decline in TLT since the beginning of 2022, all they've wanted is cow down. Just cow down. By the way, where? I do still have my decision. You can barely hear it. It's like broken.
like the Polar Express.
Put that away. Let's just put that narrative away and watch the 10-year go back to a new cycle. Okay? You can do that? That's how we're set up. You can set up that way. Did you buy some more PFIX on red yesterday? Yeah, that's how you do it. Point number 3, how about those Qs? Oh. Now, one thing for the NASDAQ to go down 3 to 5%, which is called like a correction. That's typically what if you look at my history of running my own money at least, or even when I ran money where my numbers were published all over the place, because I was at a hedge fund, we had LPs. 3 to 5%, I rarely would be down 5%. I actually got fired when I was down 3.4% at Carlisle. But I mean, being down 3 to 5% is one thing. How about down 6? 10? How about 12? Okay? Now, many of you would fire me if I'm down 3 to 5%. I like that. I like that kind of expectation. I want to work. I want to win. And if I'm not winning, maybe some of you cancel, but then you come back to me and thank you for those of you that did this morning. I appreciate it. Because what's happened since July, when some people fired us because they're, I'm missing it. I go to the golf course and my buddy is long tooth. Holy shit! I just got rooster wet. That's how you lose your money. That's how you lose your golf membership. Okay? You go from down 12.2% is the Nasdaq now, with the generals having been shot. So again, whether we like the stock fundamentally or not, I mean, Amazon's going to be very interesting today, because the trend on that is not, again, in play yet. 132 is trend for Amazon, by the way. So pay attention to that. But we have Qs again and again and again. This is where the most pain is, because this is what everyone owns. Of course, people that don't know what the hell they're doing and have that as their only asset allocation are going to have to deal with that. But again, we're looking at it for what it is, which is, of course, signaling phase 3 of the bear market. So again, that's what that is. S&P 500 actually is down a full 10% now from where we slapped that on an ETF Pro as well. And those very top three. Look at Ethan just slapping those things on. I've never hit the desk that hard.
Well, it's a good desk. Very sturdy. It's good for all situations.
I wonder if I did some training, if Bruce Lee could cut this. Next time we have a July lower high like that, it might take like 10 years. I'm going to pound that table hard. really, really hard. All right, let's just get into it. We'll,
Well,
you got something?
you were talking about pain trade. I was more thinking about like people. Honestly, I did some back of the elbow work on like the 1% blue fee for retirement. Significant. So like a 1% drawdown in retirement. If you're 55, it would take you 3.6 months of additional labor. You can allow to retire. 5% drawdown is you could be, let's see, 5% would be a 1.4 years of additional labor. And so right now people have to work about 5 more years. They're 55.
5 more years.
Of what? You'll play or retire? Pick that.
So you think that I was serious? Like, remember that time that I was in the car after a macro show and I took like Q&A? It was in July.
Yeah.
And I just kept going all the way to like 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I said, it was a profound moment. I said, this is the beginning of phase 2 of Hedgeye Risk Management after the 15 years being what it is, because I've just realized that so many people pay us and we're so grateful for that, but I'm so concerned that they don't actually understand what they're paying. Now, you're going to understand. You're not, for those of you that executed it, you're not going to have to work an extra 1.5 or 5 years. Unacceptable. Not funny. S&P 500 risk rate. Not funny. It's below a big round number. Did you see that today? 40.99. Ooh, that came down pretty quick. 42.98. Again, that's below another big round number. So below 4,300. That's well below the flip line, by the way. Tier 1 Alpha's flip line is 43.14. It's well below. I mean, we got a very dynamic situation here where the VIX went out near 21, but the top end of my range is now going towards 24. First time we've seen that in play as well. Now, if you look at the Tier 1 Alpha data on the short-dated vol, getting into this, again, Tier 1 Alpha doesn't do the Hedgeye research that I just gave you from a colonel of the U.S. military retired, General McCausland, saying it's not 6 days, it's a 6-front war, okay? So we're taking what the world believes risk to be, which is what Tier 1 Alpha is describing mathematically and accurately, and we're taking our research views and using that, that research view being augmented by, okay, are people properly pricing this in? And if you look at S&P 500 at the money implied vol, that's at 22. 22.13. And this chart, thank you, Ethan, he's front running me very well. Don't call him a rookie anymore.
I never have.
He got short too. Do you see his haircut? Ethan. He cut it tight. Everyone's getting short at Hedgehog. Ball underwater. Okay, this is the ball underwater chart again and again and again. I've been talking about this going back to August. So again, we haven't seen that blue line explode to the upside. Never mind 24. The way that this pain ends, you talk about the pain trade, is when that thing has a 3 in front. We affectionately call that the fuck bucket, okay? Okay. You remember. You remember why you're part of this. You remember why you do this. You remember why you won't have to retire 5 years later, okay? And you have weaponized it.
Yeah. Every 1% drawdown is 3.6.
Now, people on Wall Street may not understand or respect that in the way that I do. I mean, my dad worked 38 years. You think being a firefighter every day for 38 years is fun?
No.
You think you're looking to your retirement date explicitly and counting down the days? Yeah. A lot of people. In fact, most people. If you look actually as a part of Neil Howe's work, I think the recent number is 70 or 72% of Americans hate their job. So they want to retire. But Wall Street's going to just jack you like that. They're going to, don't ever forget, Wall Street is in the business of selling you their stuff. You think Jamie Dimon is the richest banker who never owned a bank in the history of the world and that wasn't a bubble? You're out of your mind. I mean, the guy's going to sell 1 million shares at $140 a share and he's got another 9 behind him. 1 million. We've empowered these people, the elites, it's never going to happen again like that. Okay? Oh, Keith, but we could turn it into Argentina. Let's see what they just did in the election. Huh? I will pray for all of you and for myself if that happens, okay? So let's just keep going here this morning. There's too much to think about. There's so many things that are happening at the same time. It's going all fractal on people. Notice how that happened. How about that volume? Holy moly, Mike Santo. Now that jackass doesn't know anything about markets, but he thinks he can, well, sort of, kind of, it looks like, maybe. That's a massive acceleration. By the way, that's the wrong data, that's yesterday. You gotta show today. Today is plus 13 and plus 15. I tweeted it even if you go to the volume tweet from this morning, where it says that it blew up big time. So, this was a big capitulation day. When the generals all go down like that, Microsoft, after having a good quarter and having an update, got buried. I mean, a lot of stocks, obviously, that everyone owns is going straight down. So it was what we thought it was. I mean, the reason why we call Mike Santoli a jackass is because, at no time in July, August, on any dip, really, do they talk about the market the same way. Like yesterday, you asked the guy, well, it broke your 200-day moving monkey. Is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily, not positively. And, it's not really that bad. But, when the market's up, it's never, you would never say, Mike, right? Well, it's really, where people are chasing these highs, but it's really not that bullish, No, it's only that, right? I mean, so many people listen to your dumbass, and it's just so bad. I can't help them if they're not subscribed. You students who might be laughing right now, it's not funny. Call your parents that have blown up 2 or 3 times, right? Why do you think they're still working? Okay, so there's a lot there. There's so much there. So much. They have the grand indicators of 50 days and 200 days, but now they don't matter? I mean, okay, we know. It's the longest standing comedy in American cable history. All right, CNBC is, and that is what it is.
I keep it up with Kardashians. It changes every day.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
far behind the Kardashians. I don't keep up.
Oh, boy. Cross asset class vol, no change. Move index 131. High yield, short it like a boss. Now, look at the tier 1 data. Look at their talking points today. $2 billion per index point, right? So the S&P 500 today, I'm not going to look at my notes, but tell me if this is right. Do the math. 451, I think there have been 451 points that have come out of the S&P 500 because I can subtract the number of, from where we were, from where we slapped it on an ETF growth. For every 1 point, dealers have to hedge $2 billion. Negative gambling. 31 points from the end of July. Think, Michael Santoli. Come on, man! You can do this. I'm trying to help him. I still, to this day, don't know why some of these new people on CNBC just don't copy us. Right? I mean, like, why wouldn't you just take a chance? Like, at least you'll sound different than your colleagues. But no.
I think you know why. It's
Oh,
because they wanted to be allowed back on. They have to fix their books. The only way to fix their book is to be on CNBC.
Well, when was the last time Doug Cash was on CNBC since he started, cooperating with the hedge fund community? I don't know, Doug. Let me know. And he's been doing a great job on Twitter, keeping people up, obviously, as well. What else we got going on for you this morning on Japan? I'm up. I'm getting up. I haven't sold it all yet, but you'll see that. In the Portfolio Solutions product, thank you to all of you that, like I said, that thing was hotter than hell's ass in terms of subscriber demand, just like the AI product. But that one that Brewster's publishing every day is free. Sign up for that. And the HedgeEye app, which is also free. I just turned it back to Red Eye, by the way, when I saw the PC number. So again, the way to think about the app is, here's Keith in your pocket, if he's working, right? I don't work that much, but if I'm working and I'm at my desk, I'll turn it on and off. Like, if I'm buying or covering, I'll turn it on. If I'm selling, like I did, I will, as soon as I get off, then I'll send you a Reddit. Right there, it's in your pocket. I think if you could take, other people that people know, what if you have ETJ in your pocket? Paul Tudor Jones.
I don't know.
He's retired, or not really. One of the more successful hedge fund guys of all time. But I would definitely take myself over him right now trading this market. That's not, no offense, Paul. I hope you'd say the same back. You would take me. I won't take you. It's fine. I got way more leverage than you have right now. Okay, what else we got going on right now? We got, then why, Paul? Why go on CNBC? We invite you to HedgeEye TV to actually come have a little talk with me on how what I just said about moving monkeys is not what you do. Okay? It's okay. You can talk like that. It's fine.
It'd be the best conversation we've had.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot. I got as much respect for Paul Tudor Jones as anybody who's ever played the game. Okay? But the game that he plays has been passed by. I think. I think you got to play. I would say to Wayne Gretzky. I've met him before. Like, dude, if you want to play the wooden stick, I can show you a 13-year-old who can shoot it harder than that. I mean, it's and it's not even a bowling. I mean, it's just it's just what it is. The game's changed. It's okay. China up for the fourth day in a row. Now that's going to be top of the pile. In as much as yesterday shorting consumer staple stocks, I went to Kraft Heinz, KHC. That should be shorted on the open. Short more Coke, KO. So what you'll get at this stage of the bear market is your go anywhere strategy, which Paul Tudor Jones would understand very well because his global macro orientation. You'll have this pop up over here, so you short that today. You'll have this going down over there, so you cover that yesterday. So yesterday I'm covering some Qs. I'm covering some of my tech XLK exposure, and I'm shorting some XLP and some consumer staples. Today, I'll be covering some France and shorting some China. Okay, you should be completely indifferent in a raging global equity bear market as to which one you short and when. It's a go anywhere strategy. It's dispassionate. I don't need to get on a channel and say my best hope is Japan till I die. Not Japan. It's getting sold, right? Anyway, India. I'm going to sell some India on the bounce, by the way, because I have two exposures there that I want to take to my minimum. Because again, they've broken immediate-term trade, and that's what you do. If it's bullish trading trend, I buy the damn dip. If it's breaking down alongside every other equity market, ex-Pakistan and Egypt, which we'll talk about maybe, we've already mentioned. Literally, those are the only two. I think the only two that are bullish trading trend currently in the entire world. And what does that tell you? You know what Pakistan's got? Got a lot of geopolitical stuff in there. Already talked about Europe, Palestine, and Israel. We've talked about that market as a leading indicator. Those markets potentially. Both markets are closed. They went down yesterday with Israel being down 14% in the last month. Already talked about oil. We're long gold again, 1937, a big higher low there at the low end of the risk range. Corn, I sold it all. I hope it doesn't offend you. Butter. Yeah. So if you're a Fed head at the New York Fed and all you do is like trolley around in Ubers and cabs or whatever, you don't have a car, you're like a health nut. You wouldn't eat butter like I do. You're an Irishman just put her in. And I won't do GLP-1. don't care if I get fat. Not really, compare. Nothing butter. Orange juice, butter. You see how these things are happening now? What I love about it is these things, I'll call them out like 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and then the old Walls tweeters will some dudes tweeting us. Have you seen orange juice? It's like so bad. Anyway, moving along.
You know who that impacts the cost of living is some of these people trying to retire as well.
You mean boomers eat butter?
Anyway, but at least butter.
Oh, that's my boomer, my dog. He gave him that Bernie's, thank you Bernie's for the dog with the breath stuff. He didn't give me the breath. He gave me some other stuff. Boomer loves that stuff. That stuff's that dog just doesn't eat anything. He's got discerning go anywhere taste, but he won't go actually everywhere. He'll eat lettuce, carrots. That's the dog. That's the dog. What else we got going on? Big higher low. I said that on the 10-year yield, the big higher low on the 2-year yield. What are you gonna do when it starts running loose on you? 505 is the top end of the range. Bitcoin's still bullish. Trade bullish trend with the median term upside to 36,563. I might take a little nibble at that, or not. I'm not sure. Never know what I'm gonna do until I actually get into the cockpit and do the Yuga loops. Let's take some questions.
Well, you mentioned inflation a couple of times, so is there any way that today you're going to be looking at expressing that inflation? I don't know if you're looking at uranium, sugar.
Good question. So today, or it's more so what I did yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, inflation was percent. So today, I'm not going to buy stuff that's up because I bought it when it was down. If you can't do that, it's going to be tough. If you can only buy it after it goes up, you're not doing what I told you. Okay? And some of you will do that because you're still old wall type and you're going to lose that baggage over time. Almost every single person that learns this process tells it, hey, so it takes time. You think? I mean, you want to be able to take a chirp at Paul Tudor Jones. You got to have a process, right? I mean, I got no problem playing against him. I'm not really trying to. I don't even know why I'm talking about that. What I'm trying to do is answer the question for the rooster yesterday. What were we buying yesterday in the MoFo, the Mucker long only account? If we have an update there today, I'm going to have an up week in a long only. Right? So 3 of the things. So they have circles. This is not a magic trick. NLR. We're buying some of that. I was buying some of that for the fam yesterday. We're buying some XLE for the fam and some USO. That's order. All right. PFIX too. That's another one. You want to keep going here? PFIX and AMLP. PFIX. AMLP. That's MLP. Another way to play. It's all the same thing. You know, Stan Druckenmiller, who I also have a lot of respect for, in addition to Paul Tudor Jones, he has this great one-liner. I was talking to a client about it yesterday. He goes, "Wow, you just think that interest rates aren't going down?" I'm like, yeah, I say it every day. I put bold letters in it. It says the bond market crashed in 2023. And I said, Stan Druckenmiller is probably the best global macro manager that we've ever had. Bounces after it collapses, those are like it's shooting them in the barrel, right? So any sector that goes bear straight to bullet, if it's a and to Kraft Heinz, KHC, that should be shorted on the open. Short more Coke, KO. So what you'll get at this stage of the bear market is your go anywhere strategy, which Paul Tudor Jones would understand very well because his global macro is orientation. You'll have this pop up over here, so you short that today. You'll have this going down over there, so you cover that yesterday. So yesterday I'm covering some Qs, I'm covering some of my tech XLK exposure, and I'm shorting some XLP and some consumer staples. Today, I'll be covering some France and shorting some China. Okay? You should be completely indifferent in a raging global equity bear market as to which one you short and when. It's a go anywhere strategy. It's dispassionate. I don't need to get on a channel and say, I best on Japan till I go. Fuck Japan. It's getting sold, right? Anyway, India, I'm going to sell some India on the bounce, by the way, because I have 2 exposures there that I want to take to my minimum. Because again, they've broken a medium-term trade, and that's what you do. If it's bullish trading trend, I buy the damn dip. If it's breaking down alongside every other equity market, ex-Pakistan and Egypt, which we'll talk about maybe, that we've already mentioned, literally, those are the only 2, I think the only 2 that are bullish trading trend currently in the entire world. And what does that tell you? You know what Pakistan's got? They've got a lot of geopolitical stuff in there. I've already talked about Europe, Palestine, and Israel. We've talked about that market as a leading indicator. Those markets potentially. Those markets are closed. They went down yesterday with Israel being down 14% in the last month. I already talked about oil. We're long gold again, 1937, a big higher low there. At the low end of the risk range. Corn, I sold it all. I hope it doesn't offend you. Butter. Yeah. So if you're a Fed head at the New York Fed and all you do is like trolley around in Ubers and cabs or whatever, you don't have a car, you're like a health nut. You wouldn't eat butter like I do, like an Irishman. Irishman would just put it right there on the bread and eat it. And I won't do GLP-1. I don't care if I get fat. I will. Another butter. Orange juice, butter. You see how these things are happening? Now, what I love about it is these things, I'll call them out like 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and then the old walls tweeters will some dudes tweeting at me, "Have you seen orange juice?" It's like so bad. Anyway, moving along.
You know who added the cost of living? Some of these people trying to retire as well.
You mean boomers eat butter? Yeah.
Anyway, but at least butter.
Not that that's my boomer, my dog. I gave him that Bernie's, thank you Bernie's for the dog eating the breath stuff. He didn't give me the breath. He gave me some other stuff. Boomer loves that stuff. That stuff's that dog just doesn't eat anything. He's got discerning go anywhere taste, but he won't go actually everywhere. He'll eat lettuce, carrots. Yeah, it's good dog. It's good dog. What else we got going on? Big higher low. I said that on the 10-year yield, the big higher low on the 2-year yield. What are you gonna do when it starts running loose on you? 505 is the top end of the range. Bitcoin's still bullish. Trade bullish trend with median from upside to 36,563. I might take a little nibble at that, or not. I'm not sure. Never know what I'm gonna do until I actually get into the cockpit and do the OODA loops. Let's take some questions.
Well, you mentioned inflation a couple of times. So is there any way that today you're going to be looking at expressing that inflation? I don't know if you're looking at uranium, sugar.
Good question. So today, it's more so what I did yesterday. Yesterday, inflation was for sale. So today, I'm not going to buy stuff that's up because I bought it when it was down. If you can't do that, it's going to be tough. If you can only buy it after it goes up, you're not doing what I told you to do, okay? And some of you will do that because you're still old wall type and you're going to lose that baggage over time. Almost every single person that learns this process tells it, hey, so it takes time. You think? I mean, you want to be able to take a chirp at Paul Tudor Jones. You got to have a process, right? I mean, I got no problem playing against him. I'm not really trying to. I don't even know why I'm talking about that. What I'm trying to do is answer the question for the rooster yesterday. What were we buying yesterday in the MoFo, the Mucker long only account? If we have an update there today, I'm going to have it up a week in a long only. Okay? So 3 of the things. So they have circles. This is not a magic trick. NLR, you're buying some of that. I was buying some of that for the fan yesterday. Buying some XLE for the fan and some USO. That's oil. All right. PFIX too. That's another one. You want to keep going here? PFIX and AMLP. PFIX. AMLP. That's MLP. Another way to play. It's all the same thing. You know, Stan Druckenmiller, who I also have a lot of respect for, in addition to Paul Tudor Jones, he has this great one-liner. I was talking to a client about it yesterday. He goes, "Wow, you just think that interest rates aren't going down?" I'm like, "Yeah, I say it every day. I put bold letters in it. It says the bond market crashed in 2023." And I said, you know, Stan Druckenmiller is probably the best global macro manager that we've ever had as a client or that's ever been. And he would say, you know, when you're on it, when you're on the right side of something big in macro, you spread your wings. Right? You don't beat around the bush. You put it on. And you buy every damn dip. You think that I don't know how to be a bull? You're out of your mind. You might be new. But there are 25 things that I'm long right here. Okay? I just gave you 5.
Let's go to the first question here. It has to do with Ami's view on the call, basically around semiconductors.
Oh, good.
And really the question is, what is the trend on these semiconductor ETFs? Trading, basically what the signal is.
Yeah, that's a sneaky way to get me because I don't like to go through like tickers, but it's a good way because you're saying if you watched the call this morning, you would have heard Ami Joseph's draconian commentary on. I mean, Ami, by the way, has been doing semiconductors since he worked at Fidelity way back on the buy side. He's been on the right side with us for a while. You know, very good contacts, and he was talking to these people, you know, I think well into when you were in your bedtime. But SMH, which is what I've been shorting on and off, is bearish trade, bearish trend. To get back above trend, it would have to get back above 152. The thing closed at 137. It's collapsing. It's crashing. I mean, just look at, you know, so TXN had an update yesterday, for example. You know, anything that bounces after it collapses, those are like it's shooting them in the barrel, right? So any sector that goes bearish trade to bullish, you know, if it's what we call a bearish phase transition, you go bullish trade to bearish trade and bearish trend. What's interesting is that those are largely the ones that haven't gone down the most yet are tech, comms, semis, okay? All the stuff that just wouldn't go down while everything else is going down. Don't forget the Russell's down 32%. The equal weight S&P 500 has crashed to down year to date for these year to date types. And so the last thing to go down, which are the generals, are the ones that actually have the most risk. Now, we had a lot of questions on this yesterday with clients. And I'm talking the world's largest hedge funds and the people that have kept their seat, okay? Yep. Dirty little secret here. The average return for a hedge fund this year is like up 2 or 3, and that's before this week. So when people say, oh, I'm up. Well, actually, if you're just only long the S&P, like what are you actually up? 8? I mean, if you're just long nothing, a risk-free money market account, you're up 5 without even doing anything. So no matter where you go, here you are. But these hedge funds, these questions are interesting. And this is very typical of the kind of, you sit across from me so you hear it. But once I do 3 calls in a row for 3 days in a row, or 3 or 4 calls, and most of the hedge fund guys that are shorter term are saying, hey man, but like where could we get a face ripper? Like, could it be this day? Could it be that day? Could it be from here? Could it be from there? The amount of times that I said markets crash from oversold levels, like if the Halls of Hedge I had a recorder, I think they do actually, I think we recorded what I'm saying, was a lot, okay? And this is very typical. A typical hedge fund manager, not our clients, they're great, but the 80% of people out there that fuck this up all the time in bear markets, because they're really only good at levered long, their shorts they don't really trust their process because they don't have a good one. Like in bear markets, Paul Tudor Jones, again, let's give him some credit. He'd say the hardest part of the move to get right is what? The last part of the move, right? To the downside. So again, what happens in the last, I think he calls it the last third of the move or whatever, the last part of the move, is that hedge funds start to cover too early because they're worried about the face ripper rally that you had in more bullish trends. Don't forget, the tech was a bullish trend bet. Go back and look at our signal in July. When you go to bearish trend and you're in a crashing global equity market, crashing global currency market, crashing bond market, all 3 of those things, I think Paul Tudor Jones probably did live through that one because we had a bond market crash when I wasn't in the game. It's not something that a lot of people have done, never mind done so successfully. Okay? So that's why I'm getting those questions. And you tell me, I mean, the market's been down for 9 of the last 11 days, and each up day is down less than the prior. And what you have to be willing to go buy is the shit that you know that you shouldn't have owned. Profitless tech, piece of shit short companies that are going to go to zero, like these things. This is what's going on.
I can go to the next question, which is kind of trading these 2 different types of things. Essentially, a ticker that's crashed a lot can barely go up versus you're doing something that hasn't really crashed a lot, like as much.
Yeah.
Like some stuff is down 20% versus something down like 12.
Right.
But it's at the top of the range. So I don't know, maybe giving you 2 tickers would help with your view on this, but like
Do you have some?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
XBI.
Okay.
So biotech versus like GXG, which is Columbia.
I'm sure, and see, for all you hedge fund guys out there that are smarter than me and have no problem telling your friends that when I'm not around, that they call me names, I'm okay with it. Some people like me. I like them too. Who's really asking the question that way? That's a well-trained hedge eye Jedi, isn't it? Can you tell me the difference between biotech and Columbia? Not the coffee, like the country ETF.
XBI and GXG, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at these two little squirrels.
Or fractal patterns. So this is going to be the way that we look at it. Let's take a gander.
XBI has been down a lot.
Yeah.
GXG, not as much, but I like to play.
You like to do that. I like that.
I like to play.
Well, you know what happens in these. Okay, very good. So let's just say that the duration is one thing, right? And then so you got the duration, and you get the actually this is how you think of credit. You think about the frequency and the severity, right? I know that that's his severity. So let's say that this thing has been going. I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's say that this thing's been going down for 150 days, in the last 60 days, it's gone sideways. Basically, what BSV is doing. So again, this thing's just like straight down, and this thing's like kind of down, like that, over the same time period. They've both been great shorts, but this one gets the severity check. It's going down violently. So you could say that was about utilities, consumer staples, REITs. Then, oh, look, Mike Santoli told us the bond yields are down today. Let's go buy that. No, stop, okay? What actually happens here, in the way that a bear market ends, is what we call factor exposure convergence. Okay? We call, as in, I made that up, I think. Because I played it with two hedge funds that are world-class hedge funds that have massive risk management systems, factor exposures, etc. And when I was walking both of them through this, they're like, "Can you go through that again?" Okay, let's do that. You just keep me up, and I didn't know you were going to. Yeah. Okay. Good. So,
No, you did not.
if you can, Ethan, if you can find it, I think it's slide 8, 9, or 10 in the macro book slide deck. Factor exposure table, the mainline factor exposure table. It's all green. It's a green table that's got durations, factor risks on it. You can find that. Good. No, go to the next one. Next slide. Next one. One more. There. Can I draw on that? Yeah. So this so the left side there, those are factor exposures. Okay. Now those factor exposures. This is pretty. I mean, these are good examples of things that I just consider a given. So again, we're in phase 2 of hedge eye risk management. I'm going to take my time to make sure you get this stuff so that next time you see it as I see it, which is I just see it as a given, right? That's it. That's actually the gap between some of us. Is that I see it, in my mind, what I see is not what you're looking at, okay? And I want you to get, the closer we get to that, the more you're going to understand the process, the less you're going to freak out. Actually, you look at the anxiety meter today, it's about as good as it gets, which is maybe telling you something about how well we've done as of late. But here you go. So if you look at something like well, let's talk about what everybody's talking about, bond yields. If this year to date, which is not how we do it, you're long low yield and you're short high yield, you're plus 10 versus minus 16. So that's been, or if you look at something like quality, high short interest versus low short interest. If you're long the good companies that not everyone's short, you're beating the ones versus the bad companies. Okay? So that's basically what everybody crowded into. Low beta, low short interest, low yield, so that's where the crowd is. When you get back, now let's look at the other side, right? These things are now converging. So the shit that's gone straight down, like XBI, is now converging with Meta, Magnificent Seven, Google. See this? On the 1 week, it's just all down, about, down 3%. There's not like these things aren't up. Then you look at the 1 month on high yield versus, look at this. Oh, on a 1 month and on a 3 month basis, they've converged. They're both down the same. That is what defines a market crash. What defines inexperienced portfolio managers in a market crash is that they live in fear that those factors that went down the most are now going to lead a rally or lead to, this is how they ask the questions. Which makes sense, right? All you need is a day to show that on the screen, and like yesterday, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, this is the beginning of something. No, it's actually the beginning of something for sure. It's the beginning of me reloading on those shorts, which is important. So look again, look at this. I mean, this one still probably has the most room to go. The quality versus the shift, right? So I expect that if we remain right that this is phase 3 of the bear market, that the recession starts here in the 4th quarter, I think you're going to see convergence where it all goes down together.
All right, thank you so much for that. We're going to have to wrap it up there. We can go a little bit over time, but we'll be back at it Monday. Good luck.
There's nothing holding you back.
From the beginning, we've dreamed of creating a better future. Now, we're setting out to be carbon neutral by 2050. And we're gonna keep dreaming, no matter where we go.
Aristobulus says that when he was sent upon a certain mission, he saw a country of more than 1,000 cities, together with villages that had been deserted because the Indus had abandoned its proper bed. These words were written by the famed Greek geographer Strabo with regard to Aristobulus, who was one of Alexander the Great's companions during his conquest of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Aristobulus wrote extensively of Alexander's campaigns in Asia, and though his original works are lost to us, fragments of them have been preserved within the words of later writers of antiquity who often referenced and quoted him extensively. This particular passage refers to a trip down the Indus River where Aristobulus claims to have seen the ruins of several cities as he explored the area. Though he didn't know what he was looking at, reading his eyewitness account of these abandoned cities today makes one wonder if he were passing by the remnants of one of the ancient world's truly great civilizations. I'm talking specifically about the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization, which built some of the world's first truly planned cities in well-organized streets in a grid formation, efficient drainage and sewage systems that were available to all, and an average standard of living for its people that was higher than anything else in the world at the time. Its traders and merchants journeyed over vast distances, both on land and over the seas, to bring their valued resources and goods to people as far away as Mesopotamia and Egypt, if not beyond. They also developed one of the world's first written scripts, as well as an innovative system of weights and measures. By what still remains of their cities and towns, the people of the Harappan civilization appear to have lived in a rather ordered, prosperous, and peaceful society that at its height may have contained an estimated 5 million people. But after over 5 centuries of unparalleled progress, Harappan civilization began to rapidly decline, and by the first millennium BC, it had been all but completely forgotten and replaced or absorbed into the societies of new peoples and cultures that had become prevalent in what was once its zone of influence. In this video, we'll cover the story of Harappan civilization, one of the greatest during the early Bronze Age. Though a few British officers had commented on them before, in the 1850s, Alexander Cunningham, the then Director General of the newly established Archaeological Survey of India, visited a few mysterious mounds near the village of Harappa in what was then northwestern British India. At the time, he had no idea how old the place was, nor its significance. Cunningham thought that he was standing atop the ruins of some early medieval fortress. While he did make some notes about some of his findings, including a seal with some unidentified characters, he and others didn't think much of them. After a brief survey of the site, Cunningham and his staff left. He made no recommendations or plans to excavate the mysterious mounds near Harappa, and for the next few decades, they were essentially forgotten. The mounds were visited once again in the 1870s, not by archaeologists, but railway contractors who plundered the area for the old but sturdy bricks hidden within them. In 1902, a young English archaeologist named John Marshall, later to be Sir John Marshall, was appointed as the new Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India. Marshall had read about Cunningham's supposedly unimpressive finds at Harappa, including the rather unusual seal, and decided in 1920 to organize an excavation of the site. Digging started the following year. Not only did he and his team find more seals with the same mysterious characters, but also the ruins of streets lined with brick houses, drains, and several figurines. In 1922, around the same time as Harappa was being excavated, another site called Mohenjo-Daro to its southwest near the Indus River was also under excavation by a team of archaeologists led by R.D. Banerjee. At first, Banerjee thought that he was digging at the ruins of an ancient Buddhist stupa that may have dated to perhaps the 3rd or 4th century AD, but he soon found similar seals to those uncovered at Harappa. Having knowledge of ancient Indian languages, he realized that what was inscribed on these seals was quite different than any version of the Brahmin script that he would have normally expected to have found around some 3rd century ruins. And so he concluded that whatever he was digging up at Mohenjo-daro was much older. It turns out he was right. In 1924, after examining the site himself, Sir John Marshall concluded that both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were of the same, so far, unknown Bronze Age civilization. He called it the Indus Valley Civilization. As the years went by, though, the ruins of more cities and towns with the same street system, seals, and pottery were uncovered throughout northwestern British India, with some of the major sites quite far from the Indus Valley itself. And so the term Harappan civilization, named after the place where it was first discovered, was adopted. Today, some, primarily in India, also call it the Indus-Sarasvati civilization. Since Harappan is the most commonly used term for identifying this civilization today, I'll primarily use that in this program. Scholars have divided the life of the Harappan civilization into 3 broad periods or phases. The first of these is the early Harappan phase, from approximately 3300 to 2600 BC. It was during this time that greater urbanization in the Indus Valley first began. The second is the mature Harappan phase, which lasted roughly between 2600 to 1900 BC. This time frame saw the height of Harappan civilization, with its development of large, well-planned cities such as Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Kalibangan, Dholavira, Bothal, and others. It'll also be the period that we'll focus on the most in this program. Finally, there's the late Harappan phase from roughly 1900 to 1300 BC. This is when Harappan civilization began to decline, with many of its once great urban centers being abandoned or devolving into smaller, more rural settlements. At present, there are well over 2,000 known Harappan archaeological sites of all sizes spread out over an immense area surrounding the Indus Valley. This Harappan zone extends east to the upper Ganges River basin of north-central India, west to the site of Sut-Ke-Gindor near the Pakistani border with Iran, deep into Afghanistan, where smaller but significant Harappan settlements have been found, and finally to the south, where the southernmost Harappan settlement to date has been discovered just north of the city of Ahmednagar in the state of Maharashtra. It's an area estimated to encompass 1.3 million square kilometers, which is roughly the size of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. Like those of ancient Sumer, Egypt, the Bactria Margiana complex, and China, Harappan civilization, at least initially, was tied to a major river system or valley. In this case, the Indus River and its many tributaries. The Indus is a mighty river whose primary source is the melting snows of the Himalayan mountains to the northwest, though it's often augmented by the heavy rains of the summer monsoon. Today, water from the Indus and its several tributaries flows across the lowlands of the Punjab and Sindh to empty out into the Arabian Sea near the modern city of Karachi, Pakistan.
Budgeting is a fundamental step towards taking control of your financial wellness. So here are some ideas to get you started. Track your expenses for a month. Look at your account statements. Use a budget tracking app or log your purchases in a notebook. Figure out how much you spend every month on things like food and entertainment, savings, housing, insurance, transportation, and debt. Use the categories that make the most sense for you. Now add up these amounts to calculate your monthly expenses. Then subtract those expenses from your monthly income. If your expenses are greater than your income, you need to adjust your spending or increase your income.
Another river that 4,500 years ago may have been even greater than that of the Indus was possibly the Ghaggar Hakra River. With the exception of perhaps during the monsoon season, it's little more than a dry riverbed for most of the year. However, the sheer number of Harappan settlements within its proximity indicates that at one time, the volume of fresh water that flowed through it was much greater than it is today. Some have theorized that the Ghaggar Hakra may actually have been the legendary Saraswati River described in the early Hindu Rig Veda. Much like today, in prehistoric and ancient times, the annual floods of these rivers provided both fresh water and silt that was well suited for growing crops. These two resources, combined with a relatively long growing season of high temperatures and constant sunshine, made the Indus Valley region the ideal place for large-scale farming. Utilizing these river systems initially proved to be a great challenge. They had to learn how to deal with unpredictable flooding, as well as clear forests and drain swampy, mosquito-infested wetlands for the purpose of creating new farmland. Only then could they make use of the region's potentially rich agricultural resources to grow their crops, which in the beginning consisted mostly of wheat and barley, but later included peas and cotton. Fields were plowed by oxen, and at times even camels. Eventually, donkeys were also used. There's even evidence that by the 3rd millennium BC, Harappan cities in Gujarat and Maharashtra had domesticated elephants. Buffaloes, sheep, goats, and pigs were eaten regularly, and whenever possible, their hides or wool was used for making clothing. And of course, being by the river or even the sea, fish was also likely a substantial part of the Harappan diet. Like in other parts of the world, consistent agricultural surpluses allowed for segments of society to divert time and resources into other endeavors, such as metalworking, town planning, engineering, and the arts. This, in a nutshell, is how Harappan civilization first began. Unlike today, where much of the Indus Valley receives on average less than 15 centimeters of rainfall in a given year, scientists have determined that the monsoons of the 3rd millennium BC were much stronger, and consequently more dangerous for the area's inhabitants. The melting snows of the Himalayas, along with annual torrential rains, meant that permanent settlements in the Indus Valley needed to have been constructed out of strong, durable materials. Given the region's climate, mud bricks, such as those commonly used in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, were not ideal because they could easily break down or wash away, especially during periods of heavy rain and flooding. The solution to this in Harappan society was the invention of burnt bricks. Burnt bricks were typically made from locally available materials such as clay, sand, and water, which was molded into identical rectangular prisms, which was the shape of each brick, and then dried in the sun before being fired in a kiln whose temperatures could reach over 800 degrees Celsius. The end result was that the brick became much tougher and more resistant to harsh weather conditions and erosion. In fact, They ultimately proved to be so sturdy that many of them were used in the late 19th century as sleepers or ties in laying local railway tracks throughout the Punjab. With the Harappan people, though, such bricks were vital in protecting their settlements against the annual floods and monsoon rains that otherwise would have literally washed them away. The use of bronze became more prevalent in the Indus Valley and surrounding areas during the mature Harappan phase, when it was used for making a variety of objects, including tools, ornaments, figurines, toys, needles for weaving, jewelry, and weapons, among other things. The large number of bronze forges discovered in many Harappan cities is a good indicator of just how important this alloy was in Harappan society, though items made solely from copper were also still very common. Copper and tin are essential in the production of bronze, but these two elements were in relatively short supply within the Indus Valley itself. Cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa had to import them. Copper was mostly sourced from mines in Baluchistan and the deserts of Rajasthan, while most of the region's tin came from Afghanistan. As Harappan settlements, some of them quite large, have been found in all of these outlying regions, many scholars believe that long-distance trade developed in order to obtain such materials, which ultimately may have been the main cause for Harappan outposts and culture spreading throughout the Indian subcontinent and beyond. In exchange for such commodities, Harappan traders are believed to have supplied their trading partners with cotton, grain, wood, shells, and finished products such as beads made from carnelian. With so much trade going on, it probably became necessary to keep track of inventories and the flow of goods and services in and out of Harappan cities to destinations abroad and vice versa. There was a need to track all of this commercial activity, and from this, it's believed that a recording system may have been invented in the form of what scholars today have identified as the Harappan writing system. The key word here is name, because unlike the cuneiform script of Mesopotamia or the hieroglyphs of Egypt, the Harappan script has never been deciphered. It has been determined, though, that the language was written from left to right, because on some seals, it appears that the scribe had run out of room and had to condense the text so that it would fit. The script also doesn't appear to be alphabetical, but instead consists of over 400 pictographs. Most of this writing appears on small stone seals, which themselves are quite simple and seemingly contain few words. There are no large epics or other works of literature written upon them. There are many theories as to what the true purpose of these seals was. The most widely accepted one is that they were somehow used in trade and commerce. For example, they could have been markers of ownership and a means of identifying goods in long-distance trade networks. The animals, figures, and other objects depicted upon the seals may have been associated with a particular region and used to signify the origin or destination of traded goods. Another theory is that such seals were used for identifying individuals. It's been suggested that the inscriptions on the seals may represent personal or place names, titles, and other information similar to what one would find on a government ID card today. Others have proposed that the Harappan seals had some sort of ritual or religious function. This is because several of them seem to depict mythological creatures or scenes that may have been associated with certain religious beliefs and practices. They could also have been used as amulets for protection and good luck. However, without being able to decipher the script, the actual purpose purpose of these mysterious little seals continues to escape us. You can imagine just what a huge source of frustration this all must be for archaeologists and historians, because unlocking this script could help to confirm their hypotheses, as well as tell us so much more about Harappan way of life, including what they may have called themselves.
Hits its mark center stage and is crushed by a baby grand piano.
You're replacing me? Customize and save with Liberty Big.
He doesn't even have a mustache.
Only pay for what you need.
We truly care about helping our clients reach their better tomorrow.
Due to the policies of YouTube, I don't talk too much about psilocybin mushrooms because they have a tendency to close people's channels for talking about that. And so, and I like to keep it family friendly and whatnot, you know. And so again, this is purely educational, and I do have experience with these mushrooms, not in a long time, but I've been to the mountaintop, so to speak. So I don't really feel the need to go back right away. But so that's who I am. I've been picking mushrooms and coming to this show since I was a kid. My grandma got me into it, and then when I was a teenager, I got a new love for mushrooms, and because of these kind of mushrooms, you know. And so I'm gonna go way back. This is more than the PNW. The earliest known uses. There's drawings on cave walls in Tanzania, down in Australia, from 10,000 years ago, and these people are said to represent magic mushrooms. You can see their crazy mushroom-looking hairdos. There's some scholars that debate that, and they say that these are probably trees, but for my sake, I think it's interesting. 10,000 years ago, people were drawing mushrooms on walls, and in Central America, there's evidence of people using magic mushrooms 5,000 years ago. In Spain, there's these paintings on the walls. The Selva Pascuala mural 6,000 years ago, and it seems to depict something called Psilocybe hispanica, which is a magic mushroom that grows in Spain. And I guess they can tell that because the stems on some of them are crooked, and they just looked at the cap to stem ratio and kind of figured like this has to be, those certain mushrooms. Psilocybe hispanica has kind of a crooked stem sometimes, so just like you see in those pictures there. So that's interesting. A different mind-altering mushroom. This is a fresco painted in a church in 1291 in France, and this depicts Adam and Eve. And instead of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they're standing around an Amanita muscaria. So the very recognizable mushroom, red with the white dots all over the cap. And then instead of leaves, they're covering themselves with mushroom caps. And so some people would think that maybe it wasn't a piece of fruit, but more of a mushroom that gave them the knowledge. This mushroom I was just talking about, Amanita muscaria. There's a lot of stories about, it's kind of folklore stories about ancient shamans in northern Siberia, and in particular a place called Lapland in Finland, which is a really far North Arctic kind of conifer forest land where it snows a lot in the winter, and the only thing that really grows out there are these Amanita muscarias, and so the story of Saint Nick some people believe actually comes from Amanita muscaria, and these people lived in these little cabins in Lapland, and it would snow so much that they couldn't open their front door. So the shaman would come to town, and he would have to go down the chimney with his gifts of magic mushrooms that people ate, and then they saw visions, and then the reindeer, because they actually had sleds that they pulled by reindeer way up there, and so they would appear to fly or whatever, and so they wore, fur suits, a lot like what Santa Claus wears. So, I don't know, you be the judge, but it seems to make a lot of sense if you think about it. So I'll make a distinction, Amanita versus psilocybin mushrooms. So Amanita here on top, the common, red with the white spots, and this is another Amanita that's kind of closely related. Amanita pantheranoides here in the northwest is the brown one with the white spots. And this, a lot of people confuse that mushroom with a magic mushroom. A lot of times when they talk about magic mushrooms, that picture will be, on a t-shirt or on a poster or whatever. And it's actually a sedative, hypnotic, and a depressant. And it has more of an effect of like making you feel disassociated and confused and drunk. A lot of people, after they've eaten it, will go lay down and have like terrible, horrible dreams. And there's a reason why those mushrooms are psychoactive, but they're not illegal, is because the effects are so unpleasant that people just won't do it a second time. And they also, they contain a couple of compounds called muscimol and iobotanic acid, which work together to give you these kind of delirium effects, but they also contain something called muscarine, which is poisonous and it can give you really bad abdominal cramps, vomiting, diarrhea. So any field guide that you read is going to tell you that the Amanita muscaria and pantheranoides are toxic, and would suggest that you don't eat them. Some people detoxify them, and you can do that by boiling them in water and then sauteing them after that, and people eat them. And they say they're good. It seems like a lot of trouble to go to. You could just eat any other mushroom that's safe, So psilocybin mushrooms, these are the ones on the bottom. They're typically what we call an LBM, so a little brown mushroom is usually, especially here in the Northwest, they're all brown mushrooms. And so they don't have this glittery red with the white spots all over it. They're a lot less conspicuous. And so these are a psychedelic hallucinogen when people talk about magic mushrooms. This is usually delicate sulfur paying them after some. And they also, they contain a couple of compounds called muscimol and iobotanic acid, which work together to give you these kind of delirium effects, but they also contain something called muscarine, which is poisonous, and it can give you really bad abdominal cramps, vomiting, diarrhea. So any field guide that you read is going to tell you that the Amanita muscaria and pantheranoides are toxic, and would suggest that you don't eat them. Some people detoxify them, and you can do that by boiling them in water and then sauteing them after that, and people eat them. And they say they're good. It seems like a lot of trouble to go to. You could just eat any other mushroom that's safe, So psilocybin mushrooms, these are the ones on the bottom. They're typically what we call an LBM, so a little brown mushroom. Is usually, especially here in the Northwest, they're all little brown mushrooms. And so they don't have this glittery red with the white spots all over it. They're going to be a lot less conspicuous. And so these are a psychedelic hallucinogen when people talk about magic mushrooms. This is usually what they're referring to, not so much the amanitas, but the psilocybin mushrooms. Over 250 species of these exist worldwide, and here in the Northwest we have like 12 or 13 that occur here, and not even native, but they occur, and I'm going to be talking about all those today. This is kind of a fun story. The first medical reports of psilocybin mushrooms were in 1799 in a London medical journal, where a father had gone to Green Park, that's his place here in London, still exists and people play there today, and he foraged some wild mushrooms, and he went home and he made stew for his family, because I guess you have stew in the morning in London in 1799, and so he fed everybody a bowl of this stew, and they all started to experience some really weird feelings, and so they ate the stew at about 9 a.m., and then they called the apothecary, which is like the doctor of the time, at about 10 a.m. and said, we got trouble going on over here, I don't know, we're all freaking out or whatever. And so this doctor goes there to observe this family, And so it was a dad and his 4 kids. And so they ate this stew. And the apothecary, he described what happened then. He said, Edward, one of the children, 8 years old, who had eaten a large proportion of the mushrooms, as they thought them, was attacked with fits of immoderate laughter. Nor could the threats of his father or mother refrain him. So it's kind of weird. They were like, stop laughing. And he stopped. To this succeeded vertigo and a great deal of stupor, from which he was roused by being called or shaken, but immediately relapsed. He sometimes pressed his hands on different parts of his abdomen as if in pain, but when roused and interrogated as to it, he answered indifferently yes or no, as he did to every other question, evidently without any relation to what was asked. About the same time, the father, aged 40, was attacked with vertigo and complained that everything appeared black, then wholly disappeared. Okay, that's weird. To this succeeded loss of voluntary motion and stupor. His pupils were dilated and his pulse was slow. And I actually read the whole medical account of it out of this journal. It was super interesting. He went through all the kids, and they were all experiencing similar things. All their eyes were pure black, right? And they were all having a terrible bad trip. Because if you take psilocybin mushrooms and you don't mean to, it's not going to be very fun. You're probably going to be like really surprised with what's happening. And so the dad kept saying, I think I'm dying. And the doctor would go, are you okay? And he'd go, no, I'm okay. And he'd say, but I think I'm dying. And then, no, I'm okay. It went on for like 6 hours. So, Dad, stew breakfast. So I don't know. Don't eat the breakfast stew in London. Or do, I don't know. So Latin is now considered a dead language, meaning that it's used in specific context, but it doesn't have any native speakers. So if you're new to mushrooms, or like me, I learned out of books, so I was learning by like trying to sound out words, you know, and I always said psilocybe, which is okay, but the most accepted in the mycological community is psilocybe, because Latin often puts a really hard sound on some of these vowels. So when it ends with an E, like hygroside, agroside, these are hygroscopy, agroscopy, psilocybe. But because Latin is a dead language, psilocybe is fine too. Whichever way you want to say it, just say it with confidence. So Gordon Wasson is the story that has to be told about magic mushrooms. This was a mycologist back in the 40s and 50s, and he was just obsessed with mushrooms. He was a New York banker, but he got really obsessed with mushrooms, and he traveled the world, not just magic mushrooms, but he wanted to know everything, but he was just a mycologist, and he was good at it. And he had the best of intentions, and then he heard about the story of mushrooms that make you see visions in Mexico, so he took off to go to Mexico, and he met this lady pictured here, Maria Sabina, and she's become famous for introducing Western culture to magic, psilocybe mushrooms. And so she took him on one of these spiritual journeys. They didn't consider it getting high. It was part of their cultural, spiritual, religious type of ceremony. And so he got included on it. And so he came back and then went back down there, and Life magazine, one of the, wrote an article about it. He kind of exposed these magic mushrooms to the world. And he had the best of intentions in mind. He really, loved the people of Mexico and stuff. But what happened was a lot of hippies jumped in their vans and they stormed down to Mexico, and they took over this town, and the people were really unhappy that all these hippies showed up in town wanting these mushrooms. Kind of exiled Marina Sabina. Eventually she died kind of in poverty, and it's sort of a sad story. And Gordon Wasson was kind of villainized for exposing this sacred spiritual thing in the mountains of Mexico. But it brought an awareness of psychedelic mushrooms to America, and it was clearly more than just hocus pocus and superstition. There was something in these mushrooms. And so the first discoveries here in the Pacific Northwest, this is Evergreen State College, and the guy up in the top left corner, his name is Michael Bugh, and he is a mycologist at Evergreen State University. And he, let me see if I can find this. So he's still very involved in mycology, and he started teaching in 1972. The doors opened at Evergreen State University. He became a professor in 1972 of mycology there. And It was 1975. These other guys that happened to be students of his, a guy named Paul Stamets, which a lot of you have probably heard of. He does TED Talks, and he's really famous for his magic mushroom talks. Jeremy Bigwood, Jonathan Ott, these guys have wrote really famous books about mycology. I happen to know Michael Buke, and he was a guest in our club meeting. So if you're not a club member for KPMS, we have some super cool guests, and he came and gave us a talk all about, not even about magic mushrooms, but I was texting with him about this subject. When did the mushroom, when we discover them here in the Northwest? And what he said is, in 1975, when Paul Stamets, Jeremy Bigwood, and Jonathan Ott arrived at my office wanting to study mushrooms, I'd never heard of psilocybin or psilocybe containing mushrooms in the Pacific Northwest. No previous student had ever mentioned them. The only mind-altering mushrooms I was aware of were Amanita muscaria and the Pantherina. Those were the names used in that day. They had Wasson's soma. They'd heard about Wasson's trip down to Mexico. And so they started analyzing a wide range of mushrooms for psilocybin content. Jonathan Ott and Paul Stamets were soon naming some of the new species they discovered. Students started hunting for psilocybe semilantiata or liberty caps. They were probably introduced from Europe at some point, but all of a sudden the mayor was calling Michael Buke's office saying, what are these students doing out in my lawn, crawling around? The nearby penitentiary, the inmates were out on their hands and knees picking mushrooms out of the grass. So the magic mushroom movement in the Pacific Northwest was in full swing there, thanks to these names. And the mushrooms have always been here because people didn't really know about it, until these guys kind of started to expose it. And Paul Stamets has really made it famous. So really cool. Michael Buke gives a talk about all about the psilocybin mushrooms and stuff. So I'm just going to go into describing some of these mushrooms for you. This one, Amanita muscaria and Pantherinoides. So Amanita muscaria is actually a European taxonomy, and here in America we just adopted it because it's easy to just call it that. It's red with these white speckles. Here in the Northwest we have a different variety called flavivulvata. It's got a little bit of yellowishness around the rings on the vulva, which is the bulbous base. And so, like I already explained, these aren't your typical magic mushrooms, but to fit into a talk called mind-altering mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest, it would be incomplete without talking about these mushrooms. So they're beautiful, but I think they should probably be avoided unless you kind of know what you're doing. I don't know, like I said, people don't usually do them a second time. So, but they will alter your mind. And then psilocybe semilantiata. This one is known as the liberty cap. And it's the genus type for psilocybe. So all psilocybin mushrooms follow the standards set by this mushroom. And it's definitely a LBM, a little brown mushroom. And it often grows on well-decomposed cow manure. And one of my earliest memories, I remember driving with my mom and her boyfriend, and I remember going by this cow field, and all these people were out there with like Safeway bags, and they were crouching around. And I remember being like, what are they doing out there? And he goes, they're looking for magic mushrooms. And I remember just being like, that sounds awesome. I was like 8, I don't know. But I grew up in a farming community, and like I said, I got into this stuff when I was a teenager, and I scoured the fields day and night looking in cow patties to no avail, and never found any liberty caps. They seem to be super elusive, and some people seem to find them. And I had friends that had found them, and they are extremely powerful, small little mushrooms. And they don't do a lot of bruising, so I'll get into talking about that, but that's one of the morphological features of psilocybin mushrooms is that they bruise blue. Not all mushrooms that bruise blue are hallucinogenic, but all of these that are hallucinogenic do bruise blue. Psilocybe cyanescens. Oh, and the semilantiata probably introduced, as Michael Buke said, from the UK. So this is the same mushroom that old guy fed to his family for stew in the morning. Very powerful small mushrooms, and so yeah. Psilocybe cyanescens, the wavy cap. These pictures were taken in Port Orchard, Washington, just a couple of years ago, and you can see they're pretty slimy, really caramel colored, and they get a feature that's called hygrophanias. So as they kind of dry out, they'll get a lighter color in the center, and then but they'll rehydrate when it rains again, and they get dark caramel brown again. And so definitely an LBM. These mushrooms like to grow under like rhododendrons. They love to grow in beauty bark. They love to grow around police stations and courthouses. You know? But the good thing is, you know, most police are not mushroom experts, so they don't know what you have if you're collecting those. They're called the wavy cap because the margin or the edge of the cap gets a real wavy look to it as they mature, and they also bruise blue, and you can find these in great numbers. We used to find them in Tacoma when I was a teenager, and some of them get really big. You know, we found some that had caps that were 3 or 4 inches around sometimes. It's pretty crazy. But this one is called Psilocybe azurescens. This one occurs mainly on the coast, coastal Washington and down into northern parts of Oregon, growing in the dune grass, as you can see here. My friend Alan Rockefeller took these photos. They have a very unbent cap, so it's got a really, really abrupt point on the center of the cap. Again, these will bruise blue, and you can really see it right here on the cap. And that bruising, that probably actually happened from a raindrop hitting it. And so it's a chemical reaction when psilocybin metabolizes or polymerates into psilocin, and it actually degrades the hallucinogenic effect when it turns blue, but it's definitely a good indicator. So down at like Fort Stevens in Oregon is a famously known place where people in their hippie buses once again flock to the coast, and they're combing the beaches and the dune grass, and the police are onto it, and people get arrested every year for picking these. And these are among the most powerful magic mushrooms in the world, so they do occur here. They're said to be imported from somewhere else too, so interesting enough. Psilocybe spincii. This one's known as the blue ringer. So this is my friend Alan Rockefeller taking pictures of these particular mushrooms in Gig Harbor, Washington last year, and they seem to be a little bit rare now. It's called a blue ringer because, again, it's another LBM. It's a little brown mushroom. These like to grow in grass oftentimes, and they also grow in wood chips. But the way that the cap tears away from the stem when they start to mature, it leaves a little ring on the stem, and that little action of tearing away will bruise that little ring, so the ring is blue. And so they get the name of blue ringer. And in the mid-90s, that's when I got introduced personally to magic mushrooms, and all these new tract homes went in Port Orchard, like Glenwood Station and Creekside, and those ones in particular. I remember somebody saying, yeah, the grass up there. And we'd go up there, and I mean, the patches were thicker than the grass of these mushrooms. The sod that they laid down came pre-inoculated with the mushrooms, and they just exploded. And the whole town was covered in blue ringers, right? And so it was like 1995, 1996, and everybody was out of their mind, just running around. People were mad because there was constantly kids in their yards with flashlights at night, you know, and I was one of them. But it was, we weren't trying to harm anybody. We just wanted the mushrooms, you know what I mean? Usually picking them and putting them in our hats. And all the field guides are going to describe Psilocybe spincii as a mild species, but that wasn't my experience. But then again, you know, we were collecting pounds of them. I mean, packing our hats full and make a batch of tea that was like 4 cups, you know, and then we would just lose our minds all. So, this one, Psilocybe baeocystis, common name bluebells. So this one is way less common. I use an app called iNaturalist, and it will tell you what kind of species have occurred in what areas. And this one's been observed only 6 times in Washington State. But also on Wikipedia, it says that it's common. So I don't know. I've never seen them in real life. Again, Alan Rockefeller took this picture, and they really sting blue. And they like to grow in wood chips, and they can grow right amongst the other ones, like the Stuncii or the cyanescens. They'll grow with them too. Another bluebell, another LBM, and you can really see all the waviness on the margin really kind of sets these ones apart, and they really do turn blue a lot, and a very powerful one too, from what I hear. This one, Psilocybe ovoidiocystidiata. People call them ovoids. It's kind of a mouthful to say ovoidiocystidiata, but that name is based on morphological features in the microscopy, so it's kind of describing the ovoid cystidiata, I guess. These ones were introduced from the East Coast And these ones, one of the videos on my channel is called the Johnny Appleseed of Magic Mushrooms. And this guy goes around and he plants these in all the wood chips and around here. So, and these are one of the only ones here in the Northwest that fruit in the spring. So most of all the other ones will fruit in the fall, like right now, this is happening. These ones will fruit in the spring and sometimes in the fall also. And so there was a couple of different like phenotypes, but none of them are native, so they're kind of big. Again, if you look at the bottom corner of the left photo, you can really see that blue bruising, really indicative of psilocybin content. And this is a closer up picture of some of the bigger ones. So this guy literally takes 5-gallon buckets of wood chips that are inoculated with the mycelium of these mushrooms, and then he goes and looks for where the county dumps wood chips or whatever, and just digs it all in there. And so, I don't know, they're gonna be taking over every wood chip pile in Kitsap County, I think. This one's Psilocybe folliculosa. This one, the conifer psilocybe or the striate psilocybe. This one is probably the only true native to the Pacific Northwest, right here in Washington State. And again, another LBM, but this one isn't going to grow near well, it will grow near rhododendrons, but it's not going to grow near your beauty bark beds and in your yards. This one grows in the forest. It likes a wild setting. I took both of those pictures actually last year in Port Orchard. And the one on the left, I muted out all the other colors just so you could see how caramel color they are. And they look pretty slimy. It was a really rainy day that day. But the stipes on them, the stipe is actually the stem, and these ones are really floccose, so they get this really scaly look on the stem. And they're said to be a pretty mild species. Last year I went to a clear cut. I was riding my mountain bike out near Green Mountain and came to a clear cut, and I looked down at my feet, and as my eyes unfocused, I looked out, and it was hundreds of thousands of these mushrooms growing in the clear cut. And it's probably like that right now up there, So these are actually really common. They're really small, and they call it the striate psilocybe, and you can't really see it too well, but right here in this picture, if you can see it, you can see little striations going from the top of the cap to the side to the end of the margin. And no other psilocybin mushroom really has that morphology, so I kind of like that as a common name as much as I don't really care for common names. The striate psilocybe is a good one because it looks like a mycena, except for it's going to have a dark spore print. Mycenas are thousands of these little tiny mushrooms that you see growing in the forest. These can look a lot like those until you take a closer look and you go, oh, okay, these are sillies. So, Psilocybe cubensis. This is the one that you're going to find in the parking lot of the Grateful Dead concert. This is the one that's growing in people's closets. This one has been reported to have shown up in wood chips here in Washington State. I've recently saw pictures where somebody said, what's this growing in the wood chips? Psilocybe cubensis is a mushroom that's from a subtropical region, so it grows in like Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, down south. It grows in cow dung, but it's easily cultivated. It's fairly powerful, and so this is the one that people normally grow and use for medicinal reasons or whatever. Right here on the right is an example of one that's just a crazy, an example of all the hybridization and all the breeding that they've done. It doesn't even appear anything like a mushroom. It's just like this big crazy glob of white and blue and all this twisted weird gill formations up on top. But these will weigh like 2 pounds each, and people are just going crazy breeding these mushrooms. All right, so Psilocybe cubensis. This one, really unlikely to find, but I just thought, this one must be talked about because if anybody got some at a rock show or something, whatever, it's probably what it was. So common morphological features of psilocybe mushrooms: blue bruising. So all of these mushrooms bruise blue, and you can really see it in that top picture. That's actually a scalpel cut cubensis in half, and you can see all that bluing reaction. And so it's psilocybin that polymerizes into psilocin, which is actually, psilocin is really what gets you high. The psilocybin kind of gets the limelight, but really it doesn't, it's inactive until it's metabolized by things in your brain. Anyways, it's a really complicated process, but they all bruise blue like that. There's also some types of boletes, and there's even some lexinum, like some birch boletes that are out here that I brought that are bruising blue. It doesn't mean that they're hallucinogenic. and it's a totally different chemical process that makes those ones turn blue. Another feature that these all share in common, a removable gelatinous pellicle. So you can see in this photo, there's a slimy layer on top of the cap, so if you slowly start to tear the cap apart, you'll be able to see that gelatinous layer hang on until it will finally break. But that was one of the first features that somebody keyed me onto, that magic mushrooms do that. And I haven't seen many other mushrooms that have that feature at all. So if you have blue bruising and you have that removable gelatinous pellicle, you're probably on the right track. And then the third feature that I think would totally key these out to make them so you know that they're the psilocybin mushroom is a dark purple brown spore print. So all these mushrooms are going to have a really dark purple brown spore print, and you can find that out by just take a cap of any mushroom, tear the stem off, set the cap down on a white piece of paper and leave it overnight. You can put a glass over it if you want, but it's not necessary. And it will leave a little print there, and the dark purple brown spores are pretty indicative. There's a couple of other species that have a dark purple brown spore print, but they're not going to bruise blue, and they're not going to have that removable gelatinous pellicle. These are a couple of the other mind-altering mushrooms here that grow native in the PNW. Paniolus cincellus on the left, Paniolus cyanescens on the right. These are dung-loving mushrooms. Sometimes they grow just in lawns that have been fortified with manure in the soil. They're related to the really common Paniolus phonisecii, which is your lawnmower mushroom, and everybody's lawn probably has those growing in them. They're super duper common, and they also have a really like a jet black spore print. But these are hallucinogenic. I think the ones on the right, their common name is blue meanies, because they also stain blue. Any of these psilocybin-containing mushrooms bruise blue, and people grow these in their closets sometimes too. But they occur around here, and I've heard it said that they are the most common mind-altering mushroom here in the Northwest, even though they look so much like many other LBMs that they're kind of hard to identify, and they don't have that gelatinous pellicle on it. So, and it doesn't have a purple brown spore print. This one, Foliotina cyanopus. This one, another. Look at the bottom on the left picture. The bottom of the stems are really bluing right there. And once you see what it looks like when a mushroom is bluing, you can see it better, even in very small amounts. You can go, oh, there's blue bruising right there. These ones are related to Foliotina rugosa, which is a deadly mushroom that grows here, but it has a really abrupt little ring on the stem. These ones don't have that ring, but still they're related to a family of mushrooms that could kill you, so probably one to avoid. This is for like really advanced mushroomers only, and I haven't ever personally found these, but I have found their cousin, Foliotina rugosa, which is, it contains the same compound known as amatoxin that death caps do. So they're small little brown mushrooms that grow on your lawn, and if you ate enough of them, you're going to die one of the most horrible deaths you can imagine. This one, Gymnopilus luteifolius, and these were found in Port Orchard last year. They like to grow on wood chips or rotten logs. I've seen one growing out of a deck railing before. So, Gymnopilus, really opportunistic mushrooms, and they'll seek out rotting wood. I've seen a landscaping, log that had them growing out of them. And this year, it's weird because each year, some mushrooms do better than others on different years. And this year, I follow a lot of the Facebook identification forums, and Gymnopilus have been popping up like crazy this year, which is kind of surprising, and it's cool. These are got to be like the most beautiful of all the mind-altering mushrooms, in my opinion. They've got these really bright orange spores, so when it falls on that ring on the stem, it turns it really bright orange, and it's got really yellow gills. When they're young, they're really furry and purple, and as they get old, they fade to yellow, bright gold. And they've got this beautiful cortina, which is all this webby stuff hanging off the margin right here. So I think they're definitely one of the cooler looking mushrooms. And Gymnopilus is a family of mushrooms that have several hallucinogenic species that are not psilocybin mushrooms. But again, these do bruise blue, but they are mild and extremely, extremely bitter. So I've heard that they're just not worth it. They taste terrible. You'd be burping it up. And
No, I made this perfect dress
really
for
worth it.
myself.
Effects and warnings. Yeah. So, sickness associated with muscarine. So that's the Amanita. You know, even one reported death in America supposedly attributed to that. But the guy had like serious health problems. And so it's hard to say that it was really the mushroom that caused it. But yeah, there's a reason this mushroom isn't illegal. It causes what seems like drunkenness, tiredness, psychosis, lethargy, and then horrible, horrible nightmares. And then over here, your psilocybin mushrooms. Some of the effects: relaxation, euphoria, giddiness, distortion of time, mood swings, intense introspection. Doesn't sound terrible. Spiritual or religious experiences. Difficulty differentiating between fantasy and reality. And that part can be dangerous. And there have been people who thought they could fly and they jumped off their house or whatever, and it didn't end well, you know? So it's a good idea if you're gonna do these to have somebody there that can guide you and be in their right mind, you know, to make sure that, but I think it's very rare that things like that happen. Heightened sensory perception, hallucinations, and synesthesia. Mixing of senses. I thought that was so cool because it's so true, right? Hearing colors, tasting sounds, and if you've ever, experienced psilocybin mushrooms, you're probably shaking your head a little bit like, I know what that feels like, right? In a bad mind frame, it can cause intense anxiety and fear. But there are no deaths ever been reported to psilocybin mushrooms. There was a guy, 34 years old, who died after eating mushrooms. It was a couple years ago. But when they did toxicology, he had like benzodiazepines, he had opiates, he had alcohol, he had all this other stuff in his system. And of course they want to like point the finger at mushrooms because he ate mushrooms that night, but I think it was just a huge combination of everything. This guy was like a toxic waste dump. But, they've tested them for addictiveness. And it's interesting, they did a study with rats where they put rats in a cage and there was a lever with the cocaine, right? And the rat would hit it, it would get some cocaine, and it would forget about water, it would forget about food, it would forget about mating, it would do nothing but hit the cocaine button. Then they put in a psilocybin button, and the rat went over and hit the button, and it got the psilocybin,
Hit the button.
and it never hit that button again. Didn't like that. So, you also gain like a really quick and strong tolerance to psilocybin mushrooms. So if you ate a bunch today and had a really profound experience, and you ate the same amount tomorrow,
this
it would
one,
be less. If you did it, on
go
Tuesday,
back
you would
over
just have
70.
giggles. Wednesday, you might be smiling more than average. By Friday, you wouldn't
At least
feel a
that's
single
what I
thing.
can hope for.
That's how quickly
I'm already
it adapted
shorted,
them. It's
but I
crazy.
want to be shorter.
But absolutely unaddictive. In fact, most people that do it don't want to do it again, for at least for quite a while. And if you do, there might be something wrong here, because the current laws about these mushrooms, they're federally illegal, considered a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs are substances or chemicals which are defined as drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, which is kind of crazy that they put them in here. Michael Butte told me that this happened in the 1970s. Richard Nixon did it because mushrooms were making people too nice, and it was affecting the war effort in Vietnam. So they put them as a Schedule I drug with heroin, LSD, marijuana, peyote. Recently, Oregon voters passed the 2020 Oregon Ballot Measure 109, making it the first state to both decriminalize psilocybin and also legalize it for therapeutic use. So they're making big steps there to try to harness the power of these mushrooms and use them in a responsible way. So we're going a long ways from like getting high to like getting healed, and it's cool. Something this powerful could be used in a positive way is really, really cool. So Oregon's on the forefront of that. Colorado's close behind. Seattle, of course, is close behind whatever Oregon seems to do. Cities in Washington like Seattle and Port Townsend have decriminalized them, but that's like on a city level, so it's lowest priority. So I guess the cops aren't going to go after you, or if they find some magic mushrooms in your possession, they're probably just going to look the other way. So that's my presentation for today, and thank you all for coming out, and I'll take some questions.
How quickly do you see blue bruising?
How quickly do you see blue bruising? I think within about 20 minutes. cut that in half, you could just sit and watch it turn blue before your eyes. But psilocybe mushrooms, not so much. But so it takes a little bit.
That friend of yours, I forgot his name. He looks familiar. Is he a friend by any chance of a dude from with a thick Detroit accent and a
Yeah. Alan Rockefeller is, he's
crime pays but
Bonnie doesn't. Yeah. So Alan is really well known in the mycological community, and he just did a talk at the Coast about psilocybin mushrooms of North America, which I had the pleasure of filming and uploading onto my YouTube channel. A little shameless plug for Mushroom Wonderland. So check that out if you want to hear Alan Rockefeller. He travels all over the world looking at these kind of mushrooms and studying. So super interesting.
Do you have a video about how like this is a little brown mushroom and then this is not a little brown mushroom sort of comparison?
Well, yeah, I think a little brown mushroom covers a lot of types of mushrooms, but I actually made a video last year that was psilocybe folliculosa versus Galerina marginata. So Galerina is a deadly mushroom, and psilocybe folliculosa is a hallucinogenic mushroom that people are trying to eat. These two are growing right next to each other. So I made a video about the dangers and how to differentiate the two, and that was the one warning that I've got from YouTube. They said that that's dangerous content, so I was like, well, I thought it was probably a lot of harm reduction. It was probably one of the more useful videos, because people are going to go out and pick these regardless, so it's better to be safe and knowledgeable, in my opinion.
Are there any studies on how long it takes psilocybin to degrade out of your system?
That's a good question. Are there any studies about how long it takes for psilocin to get out of your system? I don't even know. Are you talking about for like a urinalysis test or something like that, or like?
I mean, like you said, the tolerance can.
Oh, gotcha. I don't know that. I would love to pontificate, but I'm not getting it because I don't know. But that is interesting. So, thanks for that question. I'm going to look it up. So. Yeah, what do you got?
What color's spore print would the Galerina have?
So Galerina is like a really, it's a brownish orange spore print. So that one, it's kind of a lighter brown color, and the Galerina are probably the most commonly confused. So as far as like lookalikes, Galerina is a concern here because it likes to grow on wood mulch, just like Psilocybe cyanescens. They can grow near each other, and but it's not going to have that dark purple brown spore print, and it's not going to bruise blue, and it's not going to have the removable gelatinous pellicle. So if you compare everything against those three criteria, you're going to be safe.
Thank you. Yeah, those Galerinas, those are also really, really commonly misidentified in mushroom forms too. So sometimes people will find them, they'll post them, and then they're misidentified.
Yeah. And then there is that threat, and that's one thing about online identification forums is you got some people just spouting things they have no idea what they're talking about, and it can be dangerous that way, So.
How do we find your YouTube presentation?
So just go on youtube.com and look up the words Mushroom Wonderland and look my hat. And there's all kinds of videos. There's 120 different videos. I do a lot of foraging, mainly of wild edible mushrooms, and just
when you have these woke revolutions, it requires all of us at some point to say, no, I'm not going to do this.
Welcome to Mushroom Wonderland.
What's up, Aaron Hilliard, Mushroom Wonderland. This video is for identification purposes only, and today I'm meeting Alan Rockefeller here, the one and only. Also met up with Fungi Knight on Instagram. So three of us are going to take a look at these mushrooms. So come along, Mushroom Wonderland, hit subscribe, hit like. Thanks for watching.
Something like that. There's a place near Quinault that has some inosity.
Oh, okay.
And psilocybin is super rare. So I got some coordinates for someone found one of those.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm gonna hike out there and see what I can find.
Nice.
There's also Mycena quinaultensis, which is the only mushroom I found with both fluorescent and bioluminescent.
Oh, wow.
So it glows in the black light, and then you turn the lights off and it still glows in the dark.
Oh, cool.
Really crazy Mycena. It's got like a really slimy skin.
There was some Mycena that you had found, like I think in Mexico, that was the stem, just the stem glows.
Yeah,
Just
Mycena
super.
fulgurate.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
We're in this kind of marshy wetland. That's actually not that wet, but. Yeah.
I wonder if it's growing with that crap.
What keyed you into thinking about coming looking out here?
It just looked like a suitable science spot. Found a couple last year, like just small ones, and then, yeah.
So do you search around in wetland areas like this? For
I mean, for restoration areas, so yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So wants to be stuntsy eye. Oh, look at this thing here.
Yeah. These are pretty wavy for
Yeah, they've been here over a while.
stuntsy.
See the ring there.
Man.
Not too much smell.
They do have that kind of a removable pellicle
Yeah, it would probably peel
gelatinous.
if you tried to peel it.
I remember that was the first clue I ever was given to identify a psilocybe was if you gently pull the cap apart, you'll see that slimy layer kind of stay intact.
The ring is in decent shape, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's your blue ring.
Yeah, growing from this piece of grass.
So cyanescents don't have that ring.
No, you kind of have. They can have a ring zone, but it's a little bit more of a scoop green and white like that.
Well pronounced.
This one has a pretty good ring. It's slugzated at the top of the cap, so it's kind of falling off, but the ring's in good shape.
Oh, is it? You have really, really nice rings on there.
And there'll be a lot of good mycelium in this stem base. We'll plant the stem base either in wood chips or it looks like they're growing with the grass, so we could just like kind of plant them in at the base of one of these stalks of grass.
Cool. Yeah, they seem to like this kind of tufty pampas grass.
Yeah, and also this thing here where I just pop some out, if I stuff this with grass, that'll all colonize. It'll be really good food for them next year.
Cool. So there's little mycelium living in the ground right here underneath us, probably right where I'm walking. And it's just waiting for the right time to pop its head out and spread some spores. They're definitely harder to see here than they are in people's yards. It's just nice grass, and they need to see these big patches of them. So Alan's very careful about how he picks. Pay attention here.
Yeah, well, I'm picking these for photography and science, so I'm keeping the stem bases attached.
Very cool. Go find those ones by that white tube. Well,
Yeah, let's see what else we can find. We'll see
Yeah.
everything by the way.
Or is it Celsovotica from
I have DNA sequences of Sylvatica, and I have microscopy of the type collection, but I do not have any photos of it fresh, so I don't know what it looks like. So I don't know the answer.
Pictures on Schumer, they look super similar.
They'll probably look cool.
Probably.
Well, the people that did those pictures of Schumer, they never did microscopy or sequencing to figure out what they are. And then another one that's kind of in that group is Cyanofibrillosa.
Yeah, didn't
I used to think that we had good Cyanofibrillosa. Like Paul Stamets' concept of Cyanofibrillosa turned out to be benign. But the real Cyanofibrillosa, I think, is more like a Mycena, kind of like folliculosa shape. And I don't know if it's actually folliculosa or if it's actually a different species closely related to folliculosa. But I don't have any DNA sequences that I can point to right now and be like, this is Cyanofibrillosa.
Yeah, I'm gonna be quick with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guy, stunts guy, however you want to say it. Look how blue the cap on that guy is. And there's little pins. Look how blue that pin is. That's cool. Look at that guy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can definitely see like frost bluing up the pins a lot.
Right? Oh yeah, look at that little slammer. So on your way back down to California, are you going to go by the dunes out there in Oregon, Fort Stevens?
Yeah, I'll probably take the coast down.
Hit some Azurescence on the way?
Yeah, I mostly find Azurescence in the Washington coast.
Oh, okay.
A little bit more chill than but I think there's less hunters on the Washington coast too. It's just like the Fort Stevens stuff is so well known.
Yeah, people flock there. Yeah, these are definitely not as stout and robust as the ones I'd find when I was a kid. I remember them just being thick and hardy. We'd tear them out by the handfuls, you know.
Yeah, I bet if you took these and brewed them in wood chips, they would be, you know, same sport, same culture, would be super robust.
Is it intact? Cool. Put that in there with the pitch. I heard something about psilocybin maybe being a defense mechanism for the
Growing. It's more potent by weight, so if you have 100 pins, you'll have, more, if you have 1 gram of pins, it'll be a lot stronger than 1 gram of full-grown mushrooms, but 100 pins will be way weaker than 100 large mushrooms. So you want to leave pins, because they keep producing psilocybin as they grow. Also, a little thing like this, hasn't released any spores yet, so if you pick a big mushroom like this, it's been throwing spores into the air for a week, and something like this has potential. So I'm picking this one just for the photo, because I want one that can just get it up.
Good to know. So mushrooms don't like the sun and the wind very much.
No, just because it dries them out. If it's irrigated, they can colonize all summer.
Cortina, crazy fibers attaching the cap to the stake. And it tears away that leaves that little blue ring.
Microscopy is really hard. A lot of species are very close microscopically, and then with about DNA sequencing, you just don't know like how many variations there is in the species.
That's a really nice one.
It took me a few years of practicing with the microscope to really get getting.
Oh, God. Jesus! How? How, Jesus? Jesus.
A few years of practicing with the microscope to really be able to getting useful information out of it. It's just like thousands of like amorphic shapes that you compare with thousands of other shapes from the literature. It's hard.
So what are you holding there?
So this is Psilocybe folliculosa.
All right, this is a northwestern variety.
Yeah, further south I've seen it in Salt Point State Park. It's in Sonoma County, California, but it gets a lot more common in Oregon and Washington. It was described from right near Florence, Oregon. That's where they discovered it.
This is kind of a woodland psilocybe. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the city wood chips.
Yeah, I don't think it really grows in the wood chips in the city. It's like always out in the woods.
Cool. So if you're out getting your chanterelles, you might run across some of those guys. Look at how blue the stems are going. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. And that was super cool, man. Getting to come out with you guys and pick these mushrooms today. So
Yeah, can't wait to see the video.
Okay, this is a exceptionally rare mushroom. Of course, mushrooms are always rare until you find them. But this is a psychoactive psilocybin active mushroom. It's unusual because of its color. And this is in the genus Gymnopolis. There's one called Gymnopolis spectabilis, the big laughing Jim. It's notorious for causing accidental trips from people who think it's an edible mushroom. But this one's called Gymnopolis luteofolius, and it grows in wood chips, and it bruises a little bit bluish on the bottom of the step. is a exceptionally dangerous mushroom for the likelihood of confusion with this one, which is Galerana atamalis, Galerana marginata. This is deadly poisonous. This is a psilocybin active mushroom. And they both kind of share these features. Now, this is admittedly heftier, larger in stature, but that stature is not a good indication of the taxonomic identification. So this one's deadly poisonous.
Right, so I just wanted to show you guys how to look for psilocybe semilanceata or the liberty cat. Let me just show you the type. So this is a cow pasture, and a good indicator is to look for this type of grass, the Junicus inflexus. That's quite a small one. Usually you see it growing in clusters. Switch the camera lens. It often grows up in clusters like spiky lip. I believe they call it rush. They grow pretty much on top of each other, next to each other, and all the rest of it. Dogs. Yeah, I'm actually just in a local park right now, so just to show you sort of how easy it is. You don't need to go up into the mountains to look for it. So the liberty cap is ephemeral, like most mushrooms are, and it comes out after, I mean, in my part of the UK, which is Hampshire, it tends to be late October.
Greetings everybody and welcome to the Psychedelic Explorers. We are out here today in western Washington along the Washington coast of the Pacific Northwest. Out here in this logging unit today. And I'll start off this video by saying this video is for educational purposes only. We do not condone cultivating or harvesting of the species we're about to show you in this video. And and also to find them along trails and along gravel roads. But the easiest place to find this species is in logging units. The species that we are talking about is Psilocybe folliculosa. So I'm going to walk this unit here, and I guarantee you I would probably find at least a few, and I'll go over the identification features. Alright, I'm going to start walking along here and see what we find. Alright, so we've now walked this logging unit quite a ways. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but if you look in there, there's mushrooms right there. There's Psilocybe folliculosa. There's also some up over here. See them down in there. Just a beautiful species. You can see these ones especially have that pronounced nipple on top, and they have a translucent striate cap, which I'll try to show you. Oh, there's some right here hiding too. I'm going to try to show you here in a second. I'm going to see if I can get close to some that aren't so covered by brush, so I can show you exactly what they look like. Alright, so we just hiked a little bit farther down. It's beautiful. Green one right here. Some more on the other side of the stick right there. Just beautiful, absolutely beautiful mushrooms. So, when I say translucent striate cap, basically it means, in layman's terms, it has these lines along the gill. It's got perfect pronounced nipple. That is a key identification feature of these mushrooms. Sometimes you'll find them without it, but definitely look for that. Now these mushrooms also have a purple-brown spore print. So another key thing, they have a pellicle, which is like this translucent skin at the top of the mushroom, which is also very pronounced in Psilocybe semilanceata or liberty cat. So let's see if I can show you that pellicle carefully. Cap here. Try to see that. That is a pellicle. Sometimes you can get the full one in one go. It looks very, very cool. But like I said, I can't pick these mushrooms, or it'd make it a lot easier to show you, but the feature needs to get into a pinch. Cap. Pull up, and you can get a, oh, you can see it start to break away. Oh, that one didn't work very good. Well, if I can get it to show you guys here. Trying to see the skin right there. See it going away? The clear skin. Oh, you got there. Oh, saw my finger too. Try one more right here for this guy. But yeah, they have this separable gelatinous pelican is what it's called. Very cool looking. It's just like, nope, that one didn't do it. But yeah, if you were to pick these, it's easier to tell, but sadly it's illegal to pick them currently, so I'm not going to be doing that. Oh, there's a big one up here. I'm not showing you, so might be able to get on this one. Let that skin pull away. I got a good shot of it for you guys. It's just kind of hard. There, that's a good one. See that skin? There we go. Okay. So, separable gelatinous pellicle, purple-brown spore print, pronounced Dumbo, which means it has that nipple on top, and translucent stripe cap, which means you can see the lines. And a lot of times you can also see the spores. If you find one that's a little bit starting to have spore deposits along the rim, some of these don't. I'll see if I can find one of those after I keep walking that has a nice purple margin, and I'll show you that. So yeah, these are some beautiful, beautiful species here. Alright, well after walking around quite a bit, I was able to find one to show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Zoom in on the cap, so I can show you. It's kind of hard to see on camera. Maybe it's come up a little bit. So you can barely see it on camera, but it has, there you go, now you can see it. It has that dark purple-brown line along the bottom of the cap there. What that is just spore deposits. That's another really key identification feature. Is that line? Let's try and twist this to show you some more. Looks like the most there is on that side right there. Perfect. Now you can see it good. So that's another key identification feature. So yeah, this is Psilocybe folliculosa, and they grow throughout the Pacific Northwest in Washington, Oregon, and I think people have found them in California. And you just want to look for logging units that are about 2 to 3 years old. And again, purple-brown spore print, translucent stripe cap, and separable gelatinous pellicle, which is that translucent skin on top. Also, another identification feature that some people tend to find, if you carefully look at the base of these stems, sometimes it might
During the mid-7th century BC, the Neo-Assyrian Empire ruled over the largest territory that the world had ever seen at the time. Leading this vast empire was a cunning military commander named Ashurbanipal, who was popular among his people but merciless when dealing with enemies. His obsession with collecting knowledge led him to construct the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal, which has been referred to as the most precious source of historical material in the world. Ashurbanipal, whose name means Ashur has made another son, was born in the Neo-Assyrian capital of Nineveh in 685 BC. He descended from the Sargonid dynasty founded by his great-grandfather Sargon II after he usurped the Assyrian throne in 722 BC. Ashurbanipal's grandfather Sennacherib and father Esarhaddon were both very successful rulers who had helped form the largest empire in history up to that point. Upon conquering Egypt in 671 BC, Ashurbanipal's father became the first ruler in history to control both Mesopotamia and Egypt. King Esarhaddon suffered from a severe skin disease and died only 2 years later as he was heading back to Egypt to put down a rebellion. Despite being his father's fourth son, Ashurbanipal was appointed heir to the majority of the Assyrian Empire and rightfully claimed the title King of the Universe. His first goal as ruler was to mobilize an army to crush the rebellion that his father had planned to end in Egypt. Ashurbanipal defeated the rebels with ease and campaigned as far south as Thebes. The city of Thebes was so thoroughly sacked that its destruction is used in the Hebrew Bible as an example of the devastation that can befall a city. By 665 BC, Egypt was once again under the complete control of the Assyrian Empire. Ashurbanipal appointed an Egyptian prince named Psamtik as pharaoh. The prince had been captured several years earlier and forcibly re-educated as an Assyrian puppet ruler. Shortly after installing Psamtik as pharaoh of Egypt, Ashurbanipal turned his attention to a new threat on the other side of his empire. The kingdom of Elam, led by King Ertak, had taken advantage of Ashurbanipal's prolonged absence in western Assyria by invading Babylonia in 665 BC. The surprise attack was easily repelled by the Assyrians, and King Ertak died shortly thereafter. Ashurbanipal's brother, Shamash-shum-ukin, grew tired of his inferior position as king of Babylon and began conspiring against his brother. Unbeknownst to Ashurbanipal, his brother had been sending secret aid to Elam in an effort to destabilize his rule. Ashurbanipal eventually launched a devastating attack on Elam in 653 BC, which culminated in the Battle of Ulai near the Elamite capital of Susa. There, Ashurbanipal won a decisive victory over the Elamite kingdom. The king described his victory by saying, "With the encouragement of Ashur and Ishtar, I killed them. I cut off their heads before one another. I dammed up the Ulai River with the bodies of the warriors and people. For 3 days I made that stream flow full of bodies instead of water. Like the onset of a terrible hurricane, I overwhelmed Elam in its entirety. I cut off the head of Teoman, their king, the haughty one who plotted evil. Countless of his warriors I slew. With my hands I seized his fighters. With their corpses I filled the plain. Their blood I let run down the land. Its water I dyed red like wool." In this relief sculpture, Ashurbanipal and his queen can be seen dining in Nineveh as the severed head of King Teoman hangs from a tree on the left. Thus, by the end of the 650s BC, Ashurbanipal had succeeded in expanding the Assyrian Empire to the greatest extent it would ever reach. These palace reliefs found in Nineveh, called the Lion Hunt of Ashurbanipal, show the king taking part in the Assyrian royal tradition of hunting lions. Lions were viewed as menaces for centuries, and these hunts were symbolic of the king's ability to protect the Assyrian people from its enemies. The tensions between Ashurbanipal and his brother Shamash-shum-ukin eventually led to a civil war in 652 BC. Shamash-shum-ukin was greatly outmatched and outnumbered from the beginning of the war, but managed to sustain his cause for several years by seeking alliances amongst his brother's enemies. In reference to the situation with his brother, Ashurbanipal said, "In these days, Shamash-shum-ukin, the faithless brother of mine, whom I had treated well and had set up as king of Babylon, every imaginable thing that kingship calls for, I made and gave him. Soldiers, horses, chariots. I equipped and put into his hands cities, fields, plantations, together with the people who lived therein. I gave him in larger numbers than my father had ordered, but he forgot this kindness I had shown him and planned evil. Outwardly, with his lips, he was speaking fair words, while inwardly his heart was designing murder." Despite building a notable coalition, Shamash-shum-ukin laid siege to most Babylonian cities, including Babylon itself, which eventually fell in 648 BC. It is believed that Shamash-shum-ukin and his family either set themselves on fire in order to escape captivity, or were burned alive by the attacking Assyrian soldiers. Ashurbanipal describes his victory over his brother and his allies by saying, "The gods marched before me, slaying my foes, cast Shamash-shum-ukin, my hostile brother, into the burning flames of a conflagration, and destroyed him. As for the people who hatched these plans, region, rebuild the destroyed cities, and play an instrumental role in the eventual downfall of the Assyrian Empire. The second conquest of Elam in the mid-640s BC was the final major military campaign of Ashurbanipal's life. He had been at war for nearly 25 years by that point, quelling rebellions in Egypt, Anatolia, and Babylonia, as well as conquering the kingdom of Elam.
Fred Meyer shortens the time from harvest to home, so you have more time to enjoy your fresh produce.
Budgeting is a fundamental step towards taking control of your financial wellness.
With his massive empire finally at peace, Ashurbanipal was free to turn his attention to more scholarly pursuits. He constructed the world's first systematically organized library, called the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal, or sometimes referred to as the Library at Nineveh. Ashurbanipal was obsessed with ancient tablets and wanted to own a copy of every text that was ever written. He commanded hundreds of scribes to search for texts across the known world and make copies for his library. The king described his motivation for constructing his library by saying, "I, Ashurbanipal, king of the universe, on whom the gods have bestowed intelligence, I have placed these tablets for the future in the library at Nineveh for my life and for the well-being of my soul, to sustain the foundations of my royal name." Ashurbanipal himself was a voracious reader of the texts within his library, and many of the surviving tablets bear his royal mark, indicating that he had read or consulted them personally. Ashurbanipal had been trained in the scribal arts before becoming heir to the throne, and this made him feel far superior to previous kings. He boasted of his unique abilities and great intelligence, saying, "I studied the secret lore of the entire scribal craft. I know the celestial and terrestrial portents. I can solve the most complicated divisions and multiplications which do not have a solution. I have read intricate tablets inscribed with obscure Sumerian or Akkadian that are difficult to unravel. I took my pleasure in reading stones inscribed before the flood, the best of the scribal art, such works as none of the kings who went before me had ever learned." The prolific English writer H.G. Wells referred to the library of Ashurbanipal as the most precious source of historical material in the world. The royal library was buried during the Battle of Nineveh in 612 BC and lay buried beneath Ashurbanipal's destroyed palace until English archaeologist Austin Henry Layard discovered it in 1849. Layard took over 30,000 tablets from the library to England, where they have been preserved at the British Museum in London ever since. The most important text found within the library was the Epic of Gilgamesh, which contained a version of the Great Flood story that predated the Bible. Today, the Epic of Gilgamesh is considered a literary masterpiece and is widely regarded as the world's earliest surviving work of literature. In 631 BC, after 38 years on the throne, Ashurbanipal died of unknown causes at the age of 54. A civil war between Ashurbanipal's two sons erupted over the throne, weakening the empire from within and resulting in Assyria's enemies becoming wretched. A revolt broke out in Babylon, led by a rebel leader named Nabopolassar, who conquered the city from the Assyrian Empire and crowned himself king of Babylon in 626 BC. Nabopolassar's conquest of Babylon gave birth to the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which went on to survive for less than a century. King Nabopolassar formed an alliance with the Medes, Persians, Chaldeans, Sumerians, and Scythians against the Assyrian Empire. Their combined armies marched on the empire's capital of Nineveh, and in response, the final Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal's son, Ashur-uballit II, fled to the city of Haran, which he established as the empire's new capital. The king formed an alliance with his Egyptian vassal, but their combined forces were no match, and they suffered a devastating defeat at the siege of Haran in 609 BC. It's unknown whether King Ashur-uballit II died during the siege, but he simply vanished from historical records after the battle. With no leader, The defeat marked the end of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, as its lands were divided between the Medians and the Neo-Babylonians. Thus, the empire that Ashurbanipal had carried to its strongest position and through which he made profound contributions to learning and world literature was conquered after only about 20 years after his death. Through great brutality and intellect, Ashurbanipal controlled the largest empire the world had ever seen and built the greatest surviving collection of ancient knowledge ever discovered. Consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and clicking the bell icon below for more videos like this. Also, please consider becoming a member on Patreon to help in the creation of new videos. Thank you.
Atlassian software helps teams harness a greater power.
Hey everyone, I am absolutely stoked to bring this program to you. In it, we're going to be talking about one of the ancient world's greatest empires, one that for a time rivaled the Assyrians and was a formidable foe for the Egyptians. It's an empire and culture that many outside of the world of archaeology and ancient history know little about, because honestly, unless you're from Turkey or the Middle East, you probably never studied it in school. So if you fall into that category, consider yourself lucky, because in this program, we're going to be talking about that empire in question, specifically that of the Hittites and their ancient Anatolian world. First though, let's take a look at this region we call Anatolia. It's one of great physical contrast, jagged and snowy capped mountains on one hand, and rough, rocky plains on the other. It's not the most hospitable place, and it's a wonder that people could actually live here, but it's true, they did. In fact, some of the world's oldest archaeological sites and settlements are from this region, including Çatalhöyük, a site dating back over 10,000 years ago. By around 2000 BC, though, it becomes apparent that many settlements started to form. Actually, you could even call them cities because they had relatively large populations of over 15,000 people. Many of them were focused around some type of citadel, and in many cases, had thick walls. They probably were not as grand as those of Mesopotamia of around the same time period, but they were places where people got together, traded with each other, and formed their own governments. Now this was all during the time period which we call the early Bronze Age. So why would such mountain settlements in arguably the middle of nowhere all of a sudden become important during this time? Well, it's kind of in the name, Bronze Age. As you may or may not know, bronze is made from other metals, such as copper and tin, both of which were found in the mountains of Anatolia, and by this time had become extremely valuable commodities. Bronze, and later iron, was used to create strong tools, weapons, plows, and other things that allowed people to become more productive, or to kill each other better. Such metals found in these mountains were extremely coveted by peoples further south, since in the dry deserts, riverbeds, and marshes of Mesopotamia, they were hard to come by. Trading delegations and even merchant colonies were sent to the region from Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean world to obtain copper, tin, gold, and silver. This made many of these new mountain cities of Anatolia extremely wealthy, and with wealth comes men of power and ambition. Now, as can be expected, city and later kingdom rivalries arose. Sometime around
Stay away from me.
BCE, a man named Pithana, ruler of one of these mountain
Give me
cities,
your
Zara,
penis.
also known as Kushar, became ruler of the prosperous city of
I have to do this.
This city also
And
had
then
an
we
Assyrian
can maybe
merchant
do
colony
that.
there, something discussed in another video linked to in the description. Now, as you may be starting to realize, there were a lot of links between ancient Anatolia and Mesopotamia. Bikana had an ambitious son named Nida, who really liked the city of Kanesh, so much so that he made it the capital of his kingdom. For reasons unknown, he went to war with his neighbor, the city or kingdom of Hattusa. Well, this kingdom and another one called Zalpa, which was somewhere on the Black Sea. Hattusa was taken after a long siege, which resulted in many of its inhabitants starving to death. After destroying it, he laid a curse on the city, the text of which read, and I quote, "On this site I sowed weeds. May the storm god strike down anyone who becomes king after me and resettles Hattusa." End of quote. Though the documentation from the age is scarce, Anita seems to have bested his rivals and declared himself great king shortly afterwards. Later documents tell of Anida acquiring much gold and silver from a city or kingdom known as Salatiwara. It's possible that it suffered a fate similar to that of Hattusa. Perhaps for this reason, when Anida threatened to attack the wealthy kingdom of Purushanda, its king had the wisdom to He presented lavish gifts, including a throne and a scepter of iron, and for this he was treated honorably. So it seems like if you played by Anida's rules and unity, both your life and your city were there are many in the scholarly community who say that Anita was the king of the Hittites. Others
Jennifer had a one-on-one
who
meeting
we'll
with
discuss shortly.
the leader.
Language known as Nessite. The truly original name for that document is the Anida text. Though a bit biased, the text is a good source for the life of this early Anatolian king. It's also the first text that we have in any Indo-European language. Unfortunately for his descendants, the empire which Anida founded dissolved with his death, sometime around the year 1740 BCE.
What can you do with a dollar? Well, what if I told you every time you put a dollar into a Fidelity...
So let's step back for a moment and take a quick look at the world outside of Anatolia in context and perspective. For the most part, the ancient Near East had been dominated during the past few centuries by the likes of great powers for quite some time. You first had the empire of Sargon the Great, and later his grandson, Naram Sin. After a short dark interlude, you had the prosperous and enlightened Neo-Sumerian Empire. At least, that's the way it's been depicted in many texts. Even when this collapsed, it resulted in successor states that eventually held great power and wealth. To put it succinctly, Mesopotamia accessed wealth and trade, and the kings of Anatolia wanted a piece of that action. There was only so much that could be attained from living in a rocky periphery with few good areas to farm, which was essentially what the Anatolian consisted of. Though Anida had laid a curse on Hattusa, that doesn't seem to have stopped others from resettling the city. About 100 years after he destroyed it, Hattusa was not only reoccupied, but rebuilt. This could have been due to its original advantage of the high and rocky plateau, making it the prime place for a citadel. It also kept it at a safe distance from hostile tribes to the north, as well as relatively close to all of the action that was going on in ancient Mesopotamia at the time. All of these may have prompted a local chieftain or prince to take his chances with Anida's curse and make Hattusa his capital. He himself took the name Hattushili, meaning man of Hattusa. Now, was Hattushili related to Anita? maybe. Honestly, there's been no conclusive proof of this. His father is actually listed in the Hittite chronologies as Labarna. So Labarna is considered to be the first of the Hittite line, or dynasty as we'll call it. Without a doubt though, Hattusili was one of the greatest kings of that line, and he is often regarded as the founder of the Hittite Old Kingdom. There seems to be no doubt that Hattusili had great ambitions for his kingdom, but first he had to deal with consolidating his power and putting down rebellions at home. It was after this that he established a new capital for himself atop the ruins of Hattusa and took the lion as a symbol, something that would remain a motif or a symbol of the Hittites for years to come. After securing his kingdom, at least for the time being, Hattusili engaged in his effort to get his share of Mesopotamia as well. He assembled and marched a great army southeast towards what is today northern Syria. Here was the powerful Amorite kingdom of Yamhad, with its capital at Halab, today modern-day Aleppo. Knowing that he probably didn't have the manpower nor the ability to mount a successful direct attack on Halab, he instead chose to attack another city of Yamhad called Alak. In this he was successful, and he more or less destroyed Alak. This may have been foolish because Alak was a great trade center, but destroying it definitely gave him unopposed access to the Mediterranean Sea. It also meant that he didn't have to spend necessary resources and manpower to administer what would have no doubt been a restive and rebellious population. His stay in the south, though, was short, because news reached him that his Anatolian rival, the kingdom of Arzawa, was invading his territories from the west. Now, we don't know much about Arzawa, or even its exact borders, only that it's mentioned in Hittite texts. What we do know is that Hattusili was successful in neutralizing the Arzawan threat. Afterward, he once again returned to his obsession with conquering Yamhad and taking over all of northern Syria. However, this was not to be. Hattusili would die before he could resume his crown, a very fortunate circumstance.
Stop your TV.
The story of Hattusili's death, though, is worth mentioning. Before his final passing, he had gathered around him the leading men of the kingdom and worked to the throne of his successor. They all met at his ancestral home, the city of Kushara. Hattusili was on his deathbed, and exactly what happened is a mystery. But it seems that he was betrayed first by his sons, then his nephew, and perhaps even by one of his daughters, all of whom were in contest to obtain his
Hale confirms she's pregnant with twins. Number 6 and number 7. Yes.
As his successor, Hattusili chose his grandson, Murshili, who was then just a minor, probably in his late teens. What would happen, though, to Hattusili's now growing and expanding empire? Would the old kingdom dissolve, just like Anitos did a century before? With the betrayals of Hattusili's sons and daughters, along with Murshili's inexperience and young age, a betting man would say the empire would most likely dissolve. Of course, history is full of surprises, Hittite history being no different. When Murshili ascended the Hittite throne, he was probably just in his teens. He had little, if any, experience in both matters of state or as a warrior. Despite his age, Murshili either had extremely capable commanders, was innately a great leader, or just had a lot of luck. Perhaps it was all three. He resumed his attack on Yamhad to finish what his grandfather, Hattusili I, had started. His attacks on what remained of Yamhad, mainly Aleppo and Carchemish, were relentless. Some saying 1600, others saying 1595, Murshili captured and destroyed Aleppo. Yes, the once powerful Amorite kingdom, that during its height under Yerim Lim was possibly the most powerful state in the world, was now in ruin. Only the city of Carchemish defied Murshili's full control. Though not being able to penetrate its walls, he had it totally surrounded. Besides, it wasn't going anywhere. He could starve it out if he had to. As for Yamhad's king, Hammurabi III, we're simply told that he was captured and, quote, made atonement to Murshili. So, let's get into the mind of this relatively young king. He was not destined to be king. He was made so by his grandfather when another should have taken his place. He comes of age and realizes that he has all the resources of the Hittite state to back him. He rules unchallenged for several years and then decides to finish what his grandfather started, conquering all of Yamhad. He does this, sacking Aleppo and taking its great wealth, which can ultimately be used to replenish his old army and essentially buy a new one. Now, all of these things also indicate that the gods must be. How else could one be so successful?
Idaho.
You then hear
Idaho.
of Babylon. The Babylon and Babylonian Empire that Hammurabi built is weak. So if you were in Mushili's place, what would you do? Would you go so far to the east and attack Babylon? Most, I think, would say that it's an overambitious, if not foolish venture, especially for a band of Hittites from Anatolia, venturing into a land they knew little about. Mushili, though, decided to maintain the momentum of his successes and march southeast along the Euphrates, into the heart of Mesopotamia itself and to Babylon. During that same year he conquered Yamhad, at least according to the Babylonian chronicles, namely 1595 BCE, he reached the city of Babylon, attacked it, and captured it. The details of just how he did this are scarce. In a later Hittite document known as the Proclamation of Telepinu, we are simply told, and I quote, "He, Mushili I, marched to Aleppo, and destroyed Aleppo and brought captives and possessions of Aleppo to Hattusa. Then, however, he marched to Babylon, and he destroyed Babylon, and he defeated the Hurrian troops, and brought captives and possessions of Babylon to Hattusa." End of quote. Hattusa was the Hittite capital in Anatolia.
This is going viral. But you know what should go viral? The fact that Kelly Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader gives you personalized monthly payments before you buy it. Thousands of likes.
Now, as powerful as he might have been, it's likely that Mushili's Hittite forces had some help from what were Babylon's many local enemies at the time, including a group of people originally from the Zagros Mountains, known as the Kassites. Pay attention to that name, the Kassites, because they would later go on to rule Babylonia for at least 400 years. So why did Mushili go to Babylon in the first place? As mentioned earlier, he was a young king who probably thought that his protection from the gods made him invincible. But more than that, Babylon, though not the same power as when Hammurabi ruled it, was still an extremely wealthy city. Plus, Mushili would get a lot of prestige by conquering it. His name would be remembered, and the Hittites would be both feared and respected as a major power in the geopolitical landscape of the ancient Near East. Now, maybe Mushili did want to stay in Babylon. It was probably considered to be, in those days, the most beautiful city in the world, although it's possible that Memphis or Thebes could have also held that same title. It's hard to compare, but it was probably much better than Hattusa. Speaking of which, there was some trouble on the home front. With Mushili being gone for so long, fighting in northern Syria and conquering Babylonia, members of the Hittite royal family were plotting against him. When he got news of this, he hastily had to abandon his new Babylonian prize and head back home. After all, he was first the king of the Hittites, not of the Babylonians. Besides, he probably couldn't hold on to Babylon for long anyway. Mushili had spread himself a bit thin, and didn't have the manpower nor the administrative resources to keep the lands that he had conquered in Mesopotamia. As the Hittites left, the Kassites came in, and as mentioned before, Babylonia was ruled by them for the next 400 years. Upon his return home, Mushili was assassinated and then succeeded by his brother-in-law, Khantili. This though caused tremendous instability, and the following years were filled with coups and possibly more assassinations of royal family members. In a nutshell, his successors, Siddhanta, Amuna, and Kuzia, were weak rulers, and the once powerful Hittite state began to lose a lot of its territory and prestige in Anatolia. Nearly all of the Syrian domains that the Hittites had conquered evaporated, and their once great but subdued western Anatolian rival, the Arzawa, gained their independence. a tribal people north of Hattusa called the Kashka were raiding and plundering Hittite towns and cities. A document claims that at one point, the Kashka were only a few kilometers away from the Hittite capital of Hattusa. The kingdom was a mess. So, all that work that Hattusili and Mursili put into obtaining a vast kingdom for the Hittites, not to mention the destruction of both Yamhad and Babylonia, were pretty much all in vain, all for nothing. In the end, little, if anything substantial, had come from it. Now, things did get a little better around 1500 BCE with the ascension of Telipinu to the Hittite throne. Though he can't really be described as a great conqueror, what Telipinu did was to consolidate the lands already within his kingdom, essentially preventing them from slipping away. Not a fan of unnecessary armed conflict, Telipinu also created many alliances with his neighbors. Probably the most for the survival of his dynasty, he created a proper system for royal succession, so that every time a king died, there was less chance of infighting and assassinations between various claimants for the throne. For a while, all of these seemed to have worked, as they gave the Hittite kingdom valuable time in recovering from all of the chaos of the past few decades. Unfortunately, after Telipinu's death, his successors seem to have done away with basically everything that he had accomplished domestically. The next 50 or so years were ones of stagnation, overall decline, and of course, weak rulers who for the most part weren't in power for very long. Around the year 1450 BCE, we don't know the exact date, but a king by the name of Tudhaliya I took over the Hittite throne. It turns out, though, that the beginning of his reign was quite troublesome, or at least there were troublesome events. One, a relatively new power, the Mitanni, were on the up. Two, that new power, the Mitanni, pretty much destroyed or took over other kingdoms that were once Hittite allies. There was really no doubt in anyone's mind. The Mitanni were coming for Hattusa, and Tudhaliya had to be ready. To test Tudhaliya, the Mitanni decided to inspire revolts in Hittite-held cities. One of these was a city called Ishua on the Euphrates River. Fortunately, Tudhaliya's troops were able to regain control of the situation and the city, but it proved a point that the Mitanni had their eyes on his kingdom. Campaigns with the Arzawa diverted them several times from their greater goals of conquering Yamhad and other lands to their southwest. Tudhaliya, though, seems to have learned from his ancestors' history with these people and prepared for an Arzawa attack from the west. When it came, he was able to crush it. He not only pacified his western borders, but when news reached the Mitanni of his victory, they decided to also stay put. Tudhaliya apparently had the gods on his side, so in Mitanni eyes, it was best not to provoke him, or at least not yet, after such a resounding victory. This, though, would not be the last time that the Mitanni would provoke the Hittites. Tudhaliya, though, was developing a reputation, not just in the region, but internationally. This is probably what inclined the Egyptians to make a treaty of friendship with the Hittites during his reign. Perhaps the Egyptian pharaoh knew that eventually their armies would meet in battle. Shortly afterward, Tudhaliya launched a campaign against Syria.
Dying.
This time, the city of Halab, aka Aleppo, surrendered more or less without a fight,